The woman who saved a mafia boss noticed the danger exactly 8 seconds before the bullets flew. But the real betrayal? It came from the person he trusted most. Tonight, you're about to witness a story of survival, deception, and power that will keep you on the edge of your seat for the next 2 hours. This is the tale of Ilara Vance, the woman who saw what no one else could see, and made a choice that would either save an empire or destroy her completely. Stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The rain started exactly when Ilara Vance's instincts did, sharp, cold, and impossible to ignore. She stood outside Luminaire, one of those restaurants where the wealthy came to be seen and the powerful came to make deals that would never appear in any contract. The kind of place where a single table could cost more than most people made in a month, where the wine list read like a financial portfolio, and where the staff moved with the practiced invisibility of people who'd learned that seeing too much could be dangerous. Ilara pulled her coat tighter. Black cashmere. Elegant, but not flashy. That was the line she walked now, visible enough to belong at Adrian Volkov's side. Invisible enough not to draw the wrong kind of attention. 3 years ago, she'd been nobody. A woman with a forgettable job and a talent for noticing things other people missed. Now she was married to one of the most powerful men in the city, a man whose legitimate business empire concealed an organization that operated in shadows she'd only begun to understand. And tonight, every one of her carefully honed instincts was screaming. She'd walked past Luminaire a dozen times. She knew the doorman, Roberto, 50s, former boxer, always had a kind word. She knew the valets, young guys, efficient, the kind who remembered your car and your tip. She knew the hostess who usually worked Friday nights, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire who could seat a dining room like she was conducting an orchestra. None of them were here tonight. The doorman was younger, his posture too rigid. The valets kept glancing at each other, silent conversations happening in looks that lasted half a second too long. And through the glass doors, she could see a woman at the host stand she'd never seen before. Blonde, mid-30s, with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ilara's phone buzzed. Adrian. Running 5 minutes late. Mother's car got held up in traffic. You okay going in first? She stared at the message. Marissa Volkov was never late. The woman treated punctuality like a religion, had once left a charity gala because the organizers started the program 3 minutes behind schedule. And Adrian knew that, which meant he was testing her, seeing if she'd caught the same wrongness he had. Or maybe she was paranoid. Maybe 3 years of living in Adrian's world had finally rewired her brain to see threats in every shadow, danger in every deviation from routine. I'll wait, she typed back. The rain picked up. Ilara stayed under the awning, watching the street, watching the restaurant's reflection in the dark windows of the building across the street. A black sedan pulled up, not Adrian's usual car. Wrong model, wrong plates. Marissa Volkov stepped out first and Ilara's breath caught. Marissa was afraid. It was subtle. The kind of thing you'd miss if you didn't know what to look for. But Ilara had spent years reading people. Back when reading people wrong could mean losing a job, losing an apartment, losing everything. And Marissa Volkov, a woman who'd stared down business rivals and buried 2 husbands without shedding a public tear, was terrified. Her hands trembled as she smoothed her dress. She glanced at the restaurant entrance like someone approaching a firing squad. And when Adrian emerged from the sedan behind her, tall and composed in his dark suit, Marissa couldn't meet his eyes. Ilara. Adrian's voice was warm, but his gaze was already scanning the street, the doorway, the windows above. He'd seen it too. You look beautiful. She managed to smile. You're late. Traffic. He leaned in, kissed her cheek, and whispered against her ear. Stay close to me. Marissa finally looked at her. Ilara, dear, how lovely to see you. The older woman's voice was steady, but her pupils were dilated, her breathing too controlled. Ilara had seen that before. People trying so hard to appear calm that they forgot how calm actually looked. Mrs. Volkov. Ilara took her hand, felt it ice cold despite the mild evening. Are you feeling all right? Just tired. Marissa pulled her hand back too quickly. Shall we? The new doorman opened the door with a flourish that felt rehearsed. Inside, the restaurant was dimmer than usual. The lighting adjusted just enough to make faces harder to read across the room. The blonde hostess approached with that empty smile. "Mr. Volkov, Mrs. Volkov, Mrs. Vance, your table is ready." Adrian's usual table was in the back corner, strategic positioning, clear view of both entrances, wall at his back. But tonight the hostess led them to a center table, exposed on all sides, surrounded by other diners who seemed just a little too interested in their arrival. "There's been a mistake," Adrian said, his tone pleasant but immovable. "We reserved the corner table." "I apologize, sir, but that table is currently occupied. This is our best available, then we'll wait." The hostess's smile flickered. "Of course. If you'd like to wait at the bar, we'll wait here." Adrian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Marissa touched his arm. "Adrian, please. It's fine. Let's just sit." And that's when Alara knew for certain. Marissa Volkov didn't compromise. She didn't placate. She didn't ask her son to accept less than what he'd demanded. Something had broken inside her. Something that made her willing to sit at the wrong table in the wrong restaurant with the wrong staff. Adrian looked at his mother for a long moment, then at Alara. She gave the smallest shake of her head. "Not here, not now." "Fine." He pulled out Marissa's chair first, then Alara's. As he sat, his hand briefly touched Alara's wrist, 3 taps. Their signal. "Be ready." The restaurant hummed with conversation, but it felt artificial, like a recording played at slightly the wrong speed. At the table to their left, 2 men in expensive suits were ostensibly discussing a real estate deal, but their eyes kept drifting to Adrian. To their right, a couple in their 60s made small talk while the woman's gaze repeatedly found Marissa. Alara picked up her menu, used it as cover to scan the room. Kitchen entrance at 10 o'clock. 2 servers going in, 1 coming out, normal rotation. Bar at 2 o'clock, bartender she didn't recognize, moving efficiently but watching their table in the back bar mirror. Emergency exit near the restrooms at 7 o'clock. And there, that was wrong. A busboy standing too close to it, not bessing anything, just standing. "The Dover sole is excellent here," Marissa said, her voice too bright. "I had it last month." Adrian set down his menu. "You haven't been here in 6 months, Mother." Silence. Marissa's smile cracked at the edges. "I must be misremembering." She looked down at her hands, twisted the napkin in her lap. "I'm sorry, I haven't been sleeping well." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Alara saw his jaw tighten. He was piecing it together, same as she was. The wrong location, the wrong table, his mother's fear, her lies. Someone had gotten to Marissa Volkov. Someone had convinced her to bring her own son here, tonight, to this specific place. A waiter appeared, young, maybe 25, with nervous energy and hands that shook slightly as he poured water. "Good evening. Can I start you with something from the bar?" Adrian ignored him, kept his eyes on his mother. "Who contacted you?" Marissa paled. "Adrian, I don't—" "Who made you do this?" The waiter froze, water glass hovering over Alara's cup. Around them, conversations didn't stop, but they changed pitch. People who'd been pretending not to listen were now pretending harder. "Sir, perhaps I should give you more time," the waiter started. "Leave the bottle? Go." Adrian's voice could have cut glass. The waiter set down the water bottle and disappeared toward the kitchen, walking just a little too fast. Alara watched him go, saw him make eye contact with someone near the kitchen entrance. A man in a server's uniform who didn't look like any server she'd ever seen. Too muscular, too alert. The kind of awareness that came from training, not hospitality work. "Adrian," Marissa's voice broke. "Please, not here." "Then where, Mother? Where would you prefer to tell me why you're terrified? Why you brought me to a restaurant you haven't visited in half a year to sit at a table that makes us targets, surrounded by people who are very bad at pretending they don't know why we're here?" Tears welled in Marissa's eyes. Real ones, the first genuine emotion Alara had seen from her all night. "I had no choice." Everyone has choices. Not when they threaten to destroy everything. Marissa's whisper was barely audible. Not when they know things that could end us all. Alara's mind raced. Someone had leverage on Marissa Volkov, real leverage, the kind that could make a woman betray her own son. But who? And what could they possibly know that would be worse than... Her thought cut off as she saw movement near the kitchen entrance. The fake server was talking into his collar, the kind of discreet communication that security used. Or hit men. At the table to their left, one of the suited men reached into his jacket, adjusted something. At the bar, the unfamiliar bartender ducked below the counter, emerged with his hands empty, but his posture changed. They were running out of time. Alara reached for her clutch purse, felt the weight of the small canister inside, pepper spray that Adrian had insisted she carry, that she'd rolled her eyes at, because who gets attacked at a five-star restaurant? She pulled out her phone instead, opened it like she was checking a message, started typing. "Mrs. Volkov," she said, her voice calm, conversational, "I need to use the restroom. Would you like to join me?" Marissa blinked, confused. "What?" "The restroom. I think we should both go. Now." Adrian caught Alara's eye, saw something there that made him shift in his seat, muscles tensing beneath his tailored suit. He understood. She wasn't asking. "That's not necessary," Marissa began. "It is." Alara stood, smoothed her dress, kept her movements casual. "Please." For a moment, Marissa just stared at her. Then something clicked. Maybe she saw the same wrongness Alara had been tracking all night. Maybe she just recognized the tone of someone who wasn't asking anymore. She rose on unsteady legs. "We'll be right back," Alara told Adrian. He nodded, but his hand had moved to his side where she knew he kept a weapon she'd never seen him draw, but had always known was there. "Don't be long." Alara linked her arm through Marissa's, guided her away from the table with the easy grace of two women heading to powder their noses. But her mind was cataloging every detail. The busboy near the emergency exit had disappeared. The couple at the adjacent table wasn't eating anymore, just sitting, waiting. And in the reflection of a decorative mirror, she saw the bartender pull something from under the counter that definitely wasn't a cocktail shaker. The restroom was at the end of a narrow hallway, past the emergency exit, past a door marked private that probably led to the kitchen or storage. Alara pushed through the restroom door, checked the stalls. Empty. She locked the main door behind them. "What are you doing?" Marissa demanded, her fear giving way to confusion. "Who threatened you?" "Alara, this is absurd. 3 men in that dining room are armed. The staff has been replaced. The table we're sitting at has clear sight lines from multiple positions. Someone set this up, and they used you to make sure Adrian would be here, would be in exactly the right position." Alara kept her voice low, urgent. "This is an assassination, so I'll ask again, who threatened you?" Marissa's face crumpled. The strong, imperious woman who'd intimidated Alara for 3 years collapsed into something smaller, older, breakable. "The Novak Syndicate." Alara's blood went cold. She knew that name. Everyone in Adrian's world knew it. The Novak Syndicate wasn't just another criminal organization. It was the organization, the one that made people like Adrian look like small-time operators. They controlled ports, politicians, entire supply chains, and if they wanted Adrian dead. "What do they have on you?" "Everything." Marissa's voice shook. "Documents, recordings, proof of things that would destroy Adrian's legitimate businesses, expose operations that would put him away for life. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd release it all. His empire would collapse. He'd spend the rest of his life in prison, and they'd kill him there, slowly, just to make a point." "So you brought him here to die quickly instead?" "I brought him here because they promised if I did this, they'd leave him alone after. No exposure, no evidence released, just over, clean." Tears streamed down Marissa's face. "I thought it would be better than watching him lose everything first." Alara wanted to scream, wanted to shake this woman who'd chosen her son's murder over fighting back, but there wasn't time for anger. "When? What? When is it happening? What's the signal?" I don't know. They just said to bring him here at 8:30, to make sure he sat at the center table, to keep him there until..." Marissa's eyes widened. "They said I'd know when it was time to look away." 8:30. Alara checked her phone. 8:27. "We need to move. Now." She unlocked the restroom door, peered into the hallway. Empty, but that wouldn't last. She pulled out her phone, started typing a message to Adrian, then stopped. If someone was monitoring communications, If they had the kind of resources Marissa described, a text could trigger the attack early. She needed another way. Something that wouldn't alert the wrong people. Something only Adrian would understand. The emergency exit. 20 feet away, alarmed but accessible. If she could get Adrian to move toward it, if she could create enough confusion. "Can you walk?" she asked Marissa. The older woman nodded, wiping her eyes, some of her old steel returning. "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid." Alara pulled the small notepad from her purse. She always carried one, a habit from her old life when remembering details meant survival. She scribbled 8 words, tore off the page, folded it. "Go back to the table. Give this to Adrian. Make it look casual, like you're passing him a note about someone in the restaurant you want to avoid. Can you do that?" Marissa took the note with trembling fingers. "What does it say?" "It says we're leaving, one way or another." They walked back toward the dining room, Alara's heart hammering against her ribs. The restaurant looked the same as when they'd left, but the air felt different, charged with the kind of tension that preceded violence. Adrian saw them coming, his expression unreadable. As they reached the table, Marissa's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the note, but she managed to pass it to Adrian with a whispered, "I thought you should know." Adrian unfolded it beneath the table, read it in 3 seconds. His eyes found Alara's. She saw the moment he understood, saw the calculation running behind his dark gaze. The note read, "Your mother is compromised. Exit south in 30 seconds. Adrian stood smoothly, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "I think we'll skip dinner tonight after all. Mother, you look unwell. Alara, let's get her home." It was perfect. Casual concern, nothing that would trigger alarm, but the fake waiter near the kitchen had gone rigid, was reaching for his collar again. At the bar, the bartender's hand disappeared beneath the counter. And in the corner of Alara's vision, she saw someone else stand, a man in an expensive suit, reaching into his jacket. They weren't going to make it 30 seconds. Adrian saw it too. His hand closed around Alara's wrist, firm but not painful. "Walk, don't run, straight to the south exit." They moved, fast but not fast enough to cause panic. Weaving between tables, Marissa between them, Adrian's body positioned to shield them both. 10 feet from the emergency exit, 8 feet, someone shouted, "Now!" Glass exploded somewhere behind them. Not gunfire, not yet, but something that made every civilian in the restaurant scream and duck. Adrian shoved Alara toward the exit, his other arm wrapping around his mother. "Go!" Alara hit the emergency door with her shoulder, felt the alarm shriek to life. The corridor beyond was concrete and steel, service passage that smelled like garbage and cooking oil. She ran, heard Adrian's footsteps behind her, heard Marissa's heeled shoes clicking against the floor. Then she heard the gunfire. It wasn't like the movies. No dramatic music, no slow motion, just sharp cracks that hurt her ears, sounds that echoed in the narrow space and made it impossible to tell where they were coming from. Bullets hit concrete, sparking, sending chips of wall into the air. Adrian fired back. When had he drawn his weapon? The muzzle flash lighting up the dark corridor in strobing bursts. "Stay down!" he yelled, returning fire at figures emerging from a doorway behind them. Alara pulled Marissa forward, around a corner, through a door that opened onto a loading dock. Rain hammered down, the storm that had threatened all evening finally breaking open. A black SUV screeched around the corner, and for one horrible second Alara thought it was another attack, but then she recognized the driver. Marcus, Adrian's head of security, his face grim. The SUV's door flew open. "Get in!" Alara practically threw Marissa into the back seat, dove in after her. Adrian came last, still firing back at the figures pouring out of the restaurant's service entrance. He slammed the door, and Marcus floored it, tires screaming on wet pavement. More gunfire. The SUV's rear window shattered, safety glass spraying inward. Marissa screamed. Alara pulled her down, covered her with her own body, felt the older woman shaking beneath her. Adrian was shouting into his phone, calling reinforcements, calling backup, calling the people who would make sure this didn't end here. The SUV swerved hard, throwing them against the door. Marcus took a corner at a speed that should have flipped them, but the vehicle held, the armor plating that Alara had once thought was paranoid excess, now the only thing between them and death. Behind them, Headlights gave chase, muzzle flashes visible in the rain. Adrian's voice was ice. Who knew we'd be there? Marissa was crying, gasping beyond words. Alara met Adrian's eyes in the rearview mirror. Tell him. I can't. Tell him, or we're all dead anyway. The next 10 minutes happened in fragments. Marissa's broken confession. Adrian's face going blank. The kind of blank that was more terrifying than rage. Marcus taking evasive routes through the city, losing their pursuers in the maze of service alleys and industrial districts that Adrian's people knew better than anyone. And finally, the safe house, a nondescript warehouse in a part of town where people knew better than to ask questions. Inside, Adrian paced while Marissa sat huddled in a chair, her expensive dress torn, her makeup ruined by tears. Alara stood by the window, watching the street, making sure they hadn't been followed. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving her cold and sick. They said they'd release everything, Marissa whispered. Every file, every recording, they'd destroy you. Adrian, destroy everything your father built, everything I built. I thought if you were gone quickly, it would at least be over. You wouldn't have to watch it all burn. Adrian stopped pacing. So you decided to have me killed. I decided to save you from something worse. There is nothing worse than betrayal. His voice was quiet, which made it worse. Alara had heard him shout, had seen him angry. This was different. This was the sound of something breaking that couldn't be repaired. Especially from you. Marissa flinched like he'd struck her. Adrian, please, how long have they had this leverage? 6 months. They approached me after the Fedorov deal, said they'd been building their case for years. They had documents I didn't even know existed, recordings from your father's time, from mine. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. I tried to handle it myself. I paid them, gave them concessions, did everything they asked. But it was never enough. They kept demanding more, kept pushing, until tonight they said it was time to end it. They wanted you, or they'd take everything. Marcus spoke from the doorway, his voice rough. Boss, we've got confirmation. The Novak Syndicate put out word you're dead. They're celebrating. Word on the street is they recovered your body from the restaurant. You died in the initial shooting. Adrian turned to him. What? They staged it. Brought in a body double, set up the scene. Far as anyone knows right now, Adrian Volkov is dead. The room went silent except for the rain hammering on the metal roof. Alara's mind raced, spinning through the implications. If the syndicate thought Adrian was dead, if they'd already committed to that story, they're going to release the evidence anyway, she said. Everyone looked at her. Think about it. They tried to kill him because they wanted his operations, his territory. They're not going to just walk away. They'll release enough to discredit him posthumously, make sure his organization collapses, then move in and take over. The only way to stop that is if I'm actually dead. Adrian finished her thought, his expression unreadable. If there's no one to prosecute, no organization to seize, just a dead man and a grieving family. Marissa stood, unsteady. You can't be serious. Mother, you brought me to my own execution. I think we're past the point of conventional solutions. He turned to Marcus. Can it be done? Can we sell this? Marcus considered. The syndicate bought it, at least initially, but maintaining it? That's a different game. We'd need cooperation from the coroner, the police, the media. We'd need your death to be real enough that when they investigate, and they will investigate, it holds up. What about the evidence they have, Alara asked. Even if Adrian's dead, they could still release it, destroy his reputation, hurt the legitimate businesses. Adrian smiled, and it was the coldest thing Alara had ever seen. Not if we destroy them first. The plan came together over the next hour. It was insane, audacious, the kind of thing that would either save everything or end in complete disaster. Adrian would stay dead. Marissa would grieve publicly, would sell the story with all the considerable acting skills that had made her a force in high society. And while the syndicate celebrated their victory, Adrian and Alara would work from the shadows to dismantle them piece by piece. They think they won, Adrian said, staring at a map of the city spread across the table, marking syndicate holdings and operations. That's when people get careless. That's when they make mistakes. Ilara watched him, this man she'd married, seeing him in a new light. She'd known he was dangerous. You didn't build an empire like his by being soft. But this was different. This was personal. This was what happened when you threatened the things Adrian Volkov valued most. "We'll need to be careful," she said. "One wrong move and we're already dead, remember?" He looked up at her, and despite everything, there was something like a smile in his eyes. "Might as well make it count." Marissa approached, looking smaller than Ilara had ever seen her. "Adrian, Save it." He didn't look at his mother. "You made your choice. Now live with it. You'll play the grieving mother because it serves our purpose. But we're done, Mother. After this is over, we're done." Marissa's face crumpled, but she nodded, accepting the sentence. She'd chosen to save her son by killing him, and in doing so, she'd killed their relationship instead. Some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed. As midnight approached, Ilara stood at the warehouse window again, watching the city lights blur through the rain. Somewhere out there, the Novak Syndicate was celebrating. Somewhere, people who thought they'd won were making plans for a future they wouldn't get to see. And here, in this cold warehouse, a dead man and his wife were planning a kind of revenge that would make them either legends or cautionary tales. Adrian came to stand beside her. "You could have run." "What?" "In the restaurant, when it all went wrong. You could have run, should have run. Instead, you figured it out. You saved us both." He looked at her profile in the dim light. "Why?" Ilara thought about all the easy answers she could give. "Because you're my husband. Because it was the right thing to do. Because I had no choice." But they'd moved past easy answers tonight. "Because 3 years ago I was nobody," she said. "I noticed things other people missed, but it didn't matter because nobody was listening. You listened. You saw what I could do, what I could be. And maybe that was calculated on your part. Maybe you just needed someone with my particular skills. But it gave me a life I never thought I could have. A purpose. A place where noticing details doesn't make me weird. It makes me valuable." She turned to face him. "So when I noticed tonight was wrong, when I saw what was coming, there was no question. We save each other. That's the deal." Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he kissed her, fierce and brief. "We're going to burn their world down." "I know. It's going to be dangerous. They'll fight back. People will die." "I know that too." "You're sure about this? Because once we start—" "Adrian." She cut him off. "I watched them try to kill you tonight. I'm sure." Outside, the rain continued to fall. Tomorrow, the news would report that Adrian Volkov had died in a tragic shooting at an upscale restaurant. There would be speculation about gang violence, about business rivals, about a deal gone wrong. His mother would weep for the cameras. His empire would appear to fracture. But in the shadows, in the spaces between the official story and the truth, something else would be happening. A different kind of story would be unfolding, one written by two people who'd already died once and had nothing left to lose. Ilara thought about the note she'd written, those 8 words that had changed everything. "Your mother is compromised. Exit south in 30 seconds. 8 words to save a life." How many words would it take to end the syndicate? How many careful moves? How many calculated strikes? She didn't know yet, but she was going to find out. In the corner, Marissa sat alone, staring at her hands, the same hands that had trembled when she'd brought her son to his execution, the same hands that would now have to sell the lie that he was really gone. Ilara almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Marcus approached Adrian with a phone. "Sir, the coroner is ready. We need your approval on the final details." Adrian nodded, moved away to take the call. Ilara heard fragments, burn patterns, dental records, DNA samples that would match closely enough to pass a cursory investigation, the mechanics of faking a death in the modern world. It was meticulous, it was thorough, it would have to be perfect. She looked at her reflection in the window, saw a woman in a torn designer dress, her makeup smudged, her carefully constructed appearance destroyed, but her eyes were clear, focused, ready. 3 years ago, she'd been someone who noticed things. Tonight, she'd become someone who did something about them. And tomorrow, the real work would begin. The funeral was scheduled for Tuesday, 3 days after Adrian Volkov supposedly died in a hail of bullets at an upscale restaurant where he'd gone to have dinner with his wife and mother. Alara stood in the bathroom of the safe house at 5 in the morning, staring at her reflection under the harsh fluorescent light. She looked like hell. Dark circles under her eyes, her skin pale, her hair unwashed. Good. Grief was supposed to look like this. Grief wasn't supposed to be pretty. She heard movement in the main room. Adrian, awake despite the early hour. Neither of them had slept much in the past 3 days. There was too much to do, too many details to coordinate, too many ways this could all fall apart. The door opened without a knock. Marcus stood there, his expression grim. "We've got a problem." Alara's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where the syndicate isn't as convinced as we thought. They've got people asking questions at the morgue, pressuring the coroner. They want to see the body." She found Adrian in the main room, already dressed despite the hour, studying surveillance photos spread across a folding table. He looked up when she entered, his face unreadable. "They're pushing to view the remains," Marcus continued. "The coroner's holding them off, says the body's too damaged, but they're not buying it. They want dental records, DNA confirmation, the works." Adrian's jaw tightened. "How long can we stall?" "Maybe another day. 2 if we're lucky. But boss, if they get an independent examiner in there, if they run their own tests, then we're done." Adrian cut him off. "The body double is good, but it's not that good. Not under forensic scrutiny." Alara moved to the table, looked at the photos. Syndicate lieutenants, their known operations, the web of connections that made them nearly untouchable. Nearly. "So we give them what they want." Both men looked at her. "We let them see the body," she said, "but on our terms. We control the viewing, the environment, the timing. We make it convincing enough that they stop asking questions." Adrian shook his head. "Too risky. One mistake and we're exactly where we'd be if they keep pushing anyway," Alara interrupted. "At least this way we control the narrative." Marcus crossed his arms. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we use Marissa. She's the grieving mother. She has every right to view her son's body one last time before cremation. The syndicate knows she was cooperating with them, knows she helped set up the hit. If she confirms it's Adrian, if she breaks down in front of them, sells it completely, they'll believe it." "You want to put my mother in a room with the people who forced her to betray me?" Adrian's voice was flat, dangerous. "I want to use the only card we have that they can't question." Alara met his eyes. "She did this? She brought you to that restaurant knowing what would happen. Now she gets to finish the job." The silence stretched. Adrian turned away, stared at the wall, his shoulders rigid. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled. "Call her." Marissa arrived an hour later, driven by one of Marcus's men, still looking like she hadn't slept since the night at the restaurant. She'd aged a decade in 3 days. When she saw Adrian, something crumpled in her face, but she didn't cry. Maybe she'd run out of tears. Maybe she just knew she'd lost the right to them. "You want me to do what?" Her voice shook when Marcus explained the plan. "Convince them," Adrian said without looking at her. "The same way you convinced me to go to that restaurant. You're good at lying, Mother. Prove it." Marissa flinched. "Adrian, please. Do you want this to work or not?" He finally turned to face her, and Alara saw something in his expression that made her chest tight. Not anger. Something colder. Something that looked like grief. "Because if they figure out I'm alive, they won't just kill me. They'll kill everyone who helped fake my death. That includes you. So you're going to walk into that morgue, you're going to look at a burned body that's roughly my size and age, and you're going to sell the performance of your life. Understood?" Marissa's hands twisted together. "What if I can't? What if they see through it? Then we're all dead anyway." Adrian's tone didn't change. "So I suggest you find a way." The viewing was arranged for that afternoon. The syndicate sent 2 representatives, a man named Viktor Petrov, one of their senior enforcers, and a woman called Sonia Chen, who handled their intelligence operations. Both dangerous, both smart, both exactly the kind of people who wouldn't accept a story without proof. Alara watched from a surveillance van parked a block away. monitors showing multiple angles of the morgue's interior. Marcus had people positioned throughout the building, armed and ready in case this went sideways. Adrian sat beside her, silent, watching his mother on the screen as she was led into the cold viewing room. The body was on a metal table, covered with a white sheet. The coroner, a man named Patterson who'd been in Adrian's pocket for years, stood beside it, his face appropriately somber. Victor and Sonia entered last, their expressions neutral, professional. "Mrs. Volkov," Victor said, his accent thick, "I'm sorry for your loss." Marissa didn't respond. She moved toward the table like a woman walking through a nightmare, which Alara supposed she was. Her hand trembled as it reached for the sheet. "Before you look," Patterson said gently, "I should warn you, the damage is extensive. The fire, the bullets. I need to see him." Marissa's voice was barely a whisper. Patterson pulled back the sheet, revealing the face of the body double. The work had been meticulous, burn scarring across half the face, enough damage to obscure precise features, but enough left to suggest familiarity. Dark hair, Adrian's build, positioned carefully to maximize the illusion. Marissa's knees buckled. Victor caught her arm, steadied her, and for a moment Alara thought the older woman was overselling it. Then she realized Marissa wasn't acting. She was looking at what could have been her son, what she'd tried to make happen, and the horror of that was real enough. "It's him!" Marissa gasped. "Oh God, it's him!" Sonia moved closer, her sharp eyes examining the body with clinical detachment. "You're certain?" "That's my son." Marissa's voice broke. "That's Adrian." In the surveillance van, Alara watched Adrian's face. He'd gone very still, watching his mother grieve over a stranger's corpse, watching her sell the lie that she'd helped create. His jaw worked, but he said nothing. "The dental records match," Patterson offered, pulling out a file. "We've also taken DNA samples, but those results will take several days." "That won't be necessary." Victor cut him off, still watching Marissa. "I believe Mrs. Volkov knows her own son." But Sonia wasn't satisfied. She leaned over the body, studying the burns, the bullet wounds, the careful destruction that obscured identity while maintaining plausibility. "These injuries, they're consistent with the shooting?" "Multiple gunshot wounds to the torso and head," Patterson confirmed. "The fire damage came after, when the restaurant's gas line ruptured. He likely died from the gunshots, but the fire, I've seen enough." Marissa turned away, her hand pressed to her mouth. "Please, I need to leave." Victor nodded to Sonia. Some silent communication passed between them. Then he turned to Marissa, his voice almost kind. "Again, Mrs. Volkov, you have our condolences. Your son was a formidable man." "He was my son," Marissa said, and the raw pain in her voice made Alara's chest ache despite everything. "He was supposed to outlive me." They left her there, weeping over the body that wasn't Adrian's, and Alara watched Victor and Sonia exit the building, get into a black sedan, and drive away. She didn't breathe properly until they were 6 blocks gone. "Did they buy it?" Adrian's first words in 20 minutes. Marcus was already on his phone, calling his contacts, listening to chatter on the street. After a moment, he nodded. "Word is they're satisfied. They're calling off the investigation. Far as the syndicate's concerned, Adrian Volkov is dead." Adrian leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes. Phase 1 complete. Alara wanted to say something, wanted to acknowledge what he'd just watched, but before she could find the words, Marcus spoke again. "Boss, we've got movement on their operations already. They're consolidating your territory, moving in on your holdings. 3 of your warehouses hit in the last 2 hours. Your people scattered or turned. They're not wasting time. Neither will we." Adrian's eyes opened, and the grief, if that's what it had been, was gone, replaced by the cold calculation that Alara knew meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Get me the location of their cash reserves. Every account, every safe house, every place they keep money they don't want the government to know about." "Already on it." Marcus pulled out a tablet, started pulling up files. "But boss, hitting their money directly, that's declaring war. They think they already won the war." Adrian smiled, and it was the kind of smile that would have made Alara nervous if she didn't know whose side she was on. "Let's show them what a dead man can do." The next week became a blur of surveillance, planning, and surgical strikes that the syndicate never saw coming. Alara found herself in a world she'd only glimpsed before. The machinery of Adrian's organization working at full capacity, but from the shadows, guided by a man who officially didn't exist. They started small. A cash shipment intercepted, made to look like a random robbery. A warehouse fire that destroyed product worth millions, blamed on faulty wiring. An accountant who suddenly developed a conscience and turned over financial records to federal investigators before disappearing into witness protection. Each hit was careful, calculated, designed to hurt without revealing the pattern. But Alara could see it forming, could see the shape of what Adrian was building, a systematic dismantling of everything the syndicate had taken for granted. She worked alongside him, her talent for noticing details becoming crucial in ways she'd never imagined. She spotted the discrepancies in shipping manifests that revealed hidden routes. She caught the patterns in personnel movements that indicated which operations were most vulnerable. She became the eyes that saw what everyone else missed, and Adrian listened. "Here," she said one night, pointing to surveillance footage from one of the syndicate's front companies. "This guy. He shows up every Thursday at exactly the same time, stays for 30 minutes, leaves with a briefcase." Adrian leaned closer, studied the screen. "Courier? Maybe. But look at his body language. He's nervous. And he never varies the routine, which means whatever he's doing is important enough that he can't risk changing the pattern. So we follow him." Adrian made a note. "See where he goes, what he's carrying." Or, Alara said slowly, an idea forming, "we replace him." Adrian looked at her, eyebrows raised. "Think about it. He's predictable, nervous, probably low-level enough that not everyone knows his face. We grab him, send in someone who looks similar, and we don't just learn what he's carrying, we control it." A smile spread across Adrian's face. "You're learning." "I had a good teacher." The operation went down the following Thursday. Marcus's team grabbed the courier 6 blocks from the syndicate building, did it so smoothly that passersby probably thought they were witnessing a friendly reunion. The replacement, a young guy named Danny, who had the right build and could fake nervous energy like a pro, walked into the building with the briefcase, now containing a tracking device that would map every room it entered. Alara watched from a coffee shop across the street, her laptop open to what looked like work emails but was actually a live feed from the tracker. She saw Danny move through the building, up to the 3rd floor, into a corner office where the signal stayed for 27 minutes. When Danny emerged, the briefcase was lighter. He'd delivered cash, hundreds of thousands, based on the weight difference, to someone important enough to have a corner office, but not important enough to have the money delivered to a more secure location. "Mid-level manager," Adrian said that night, studying the data. "Someone who handles day-to-day operations but doesn't make policy decisions, which means they're skimming," Alara finished. "Taking cash off the top, probably cooking the books to hide it." Adrian grinned. "And if we can prove that to their bosses, internal investigation, paranoia. They start looking at their own people instead of external threats." It took 2 weeks to build the case, another week to make sure the evidence landed in the right hands. When the syndicate's internal security finally caught wind of the embezzlement, the fallout was spectacular. The mid-level manager disappeared, probably dumped in the river, if the rumors were accurate. 3 other people in that division got pulled in for questioning, which meant operations slowed, which meant opportunities for more disruption. Meanwhile, Marissa played her role in the public eye. The grieving mother, selling Adrian's business holdings, dismantling the public-facing empire with appropriate reluctance and sorrow. Every interview, every appearance, she sold the story that her son was gone, and she was trying to honor his memory by stepping back from the world that had killed him. Alara only saw her once during those weeks, at a meeting to coordinate the sale of one of Adrian's legitimate companies. Marissa looked smaller somehow, worn down by the weight of what she was carrying. "Is he—" Marissa started, then stopped. "Is Adrian well?" Alara almost laughed. "Well." As if Adrian could be well while orchestrating the destruction of his enemies from beyond the grave. "He's alive. That's more than you tried to give him." Marissa's face crumpled. "I know what I did. I know I can't take it back. But Alara, you have to understand, I don't have to understand anything. Ilara's voice was cold. You made your choice. Live with it. She left Marissa there, walked out into the cool evening air, and tried to ignore the small voice in her head that whispered she was being too harsh. Marissa had been trapped, coerced, threatened with the destruction of everything she'd built. But she'd also chosen to save herself by sacrificing her son. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. The strikes continued. A syndicate lieutenant found himself under federal investigation for tax evasion, charges that would stick because the evidence was real, carefully compiled from records that had been anonymously leaked. A shipping route got compromised, resulting in the loss of a cargo worth tens of millions. A safe house burned down, taking with it documents that could never be recovered. Each hit was different enough that the syndicate couldn't see the pattern, couldn't understand that they were being systematically destroyed by the man they thought they'd killed. But Ilara could see it. She watched Adrian work with a precision that was almost beautiful, the way a surgeon was beautiful, cutting away disease with steady hands. They're starting to panic, Marcus reported one evening. Word on the street is they're bleeding money, losing operations, and they can't figure out why. Some of them think it's a rival organization. Others think it's just bad luck. Let them think whatever they want, Adrian said, as long as they don't think it's me. But paranoia was a useful tool, and Adrian wielded it like a weapon. Anonymous tips sent to the right people created suspicion within syndicate ranks. Carefully edited surveillance footage suggested betrayals that hadn't happened. Money moved in ways that made it look like someone was stealing, when really it was just being redirected to accounts that Adrian's people controlled. The syndicate started eating itself from the inside, and all the while, Adrian and Ilara stayed in the shadows, pulling strings that no one knew existed. 2 months after the failed assassination, Ilara sat in a new safe house. They'd moved 3 times, never staying in one place long enough to establish a pattern, and realized she'd changed. The woman who'd walked into that restaurant, who'd noticed the wrong staff and the wrong table, that woman had been operating on instinct and fear. This woman, the one who now spent her nights planning operations and her days executing them, this woman was something else entirely. You okay? Adrian asked, finding her on the roof of the building, looking out at the city lights. I killed a man today. The words came out flat, emotionless. Adrian went still beside her. What? Not directly, but I identified him as the weak link in their security network. I told Marcus where to find him when he'd be vulnerable. And Marcus's team, she swallowed. They didn't bring him in for questioning. Ilara, I knew they wouldn't. I knew what would happen when I pointed him out. And I did it anyway because it was the smart play, because taking him out disrupted their operations and bought us time for the next phase. She finally looked at Adrian. Does it ever get easier? He was quiet for a long moment. No, it just becomes normal, and that's worse. I don't know if I like who I'm becoming. Then stop. His voice was gentle. Walk away. I'll get you somewhere safe, somewhere the syndicate can never find you. You can go back to being whoever you were before all this. Ilara almost laughed. I can't. That person doesn't exist anymore. And even if she did, she turned to face him fully. I wouldn't want to be her. She was invisible. She noticed things, and nobody cared. This version of me, the one who plans operations and makes hard calls, people listen to her. You listened to her. I always listened. No. Before you listened because I was useful. Now you listen because I'm... She struggled to find the word. Because I'm your partner in this. Not just your wife, your equal. Adrian reached for her hand, held it carefully. You were always my equal. You just didn't know it yet. They stood there on the roof, 2 people who were supposed to be mourning, who were instead plotting revenge with a patience that the syndicate couldn't match. Below them, the city hummed with life. People going to dinner, going home, living normal lives that didn't include safe houses and false identities and the weight of decisions that ended in blood. 3 more months, Adrian said. That's my timeline. 3 more months of surgical strikes, of bleeding them dry, of making them weak. Then we go for the throat. What happens when it's over? He squeezed her hand. We disappear. New names, new lives. Somewhere they can never find us. And Marissa? His face hardened. She made her choices. She'll have to live with them. Alara thought about the woman who'd trembled at that restaurant, who'd wept over a stranger's corpse, who'd sold her son's death so convincingly that even the people who'd ordered it believed her. Marissa Volkov would spend the rest of her life carrying that weight, playing the grieving mother while knowing her son was alive and wanted nothing to do with her. Some prisons didn't have walls. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Marcus burst into the safe house, his face grim. "We've got a problem, big one." Adrian looked up from the files he'd been studying. "Talk." "Sonia Chen, the syndicate's intelligence chief. She's been digging into your death, running her own investigation separate from the official one, and she's found something." Alar's blood went cold. "What did she find?" "Not sure yet, but she's called a meeting with the syndicate's leadership for tomorrow night. Whatever she's got, it's enough that she thinks she can convince them Adrian's still alive." The room went silent. This was the scenario they'd planned for, the contingency they'd hoped they'd never need. But planning for something and facing it were two different things. "Can we stop the meeting?" Alara asked. Marcus shook his head. "Not without tipping our hand. The minute we move against Sonia directly, we confirm her suspicions." Adrian stood, paced to the window, his mind clearly racing. "What's her evidence?" "That's the problem. We don't know. Could be something small, a discrepancy in the coroner's report, a witness who saw something they shouldn't have. Or it could be something big. Financial movements that trace back to us, surveillance footage, phone records. Until we know what she has, we can't plan a defense." Adrian turned back to them. "So we don't defend. We attack." "Boss, think about it. She's calling a meeting because she's not certain. If she had definitive proof, she'd just release it. But she needs to convince the leadership, which means her evidence is circumstantial. Strong enough to raise questions, not strong enough to answer them." Adrian's eyes had that cold light again, the one that meant he was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "So we give her proof. The wrong proof." Alara understood immediately. "We feed her evidence that confirms I'm dead, something she'll find on her own, something that looks so real she'll dismiss her own doubts." "Exactly. And while she's chasing that, we move up our timeline." Adrian looked at Marcus. "How fast can we hit their major operations? All of them at once?" Marcus pulled out his tablet, started calculating. "Coordinating that many simultaneous strikes, we'd need at least a week, maybe 2. You have 3 days." "Boss, that's not enough time. It has to be." Adrian's voice was final. "Because in 3 days, either we destroy them completely, or they figure out I'm alive and we're all dead anyway. So make it work." Ishes. The next 72 hours were chaos. Alara barely slept, spending every waking moment coordinating with Marcus's teams, verifying intel, triple-checking plans. They were going to hit 15 syndicate operations simultaneously. Warehouses, cash houses, data servers, everything. It was insane. It was impossible. They were going to do it anyway. Meanwhile, they planted evidence for Sonia to find. A paper trail showing Adrian's offshore accounts had been liquidated and distributed to heirs. Surveillance footage from the restaurant, carefully edited to show Adrian in the line of fire with no possibility of escape. A witness, one of their own people playing the role, who'd seen the body before it burned and could provide details about identifying marks that matched the corpse. It was a masterwork of deception, and they dropped it in Sonia's path like breadcrumbs, making each piece just hard enough to find that she'd believe she'd discovered it through her own investigation. On the 3rd day, with 12 hours until the simultaneous strikes, Alara found herself back on a rooftop, this time alone. The city sprawled beneath her, oblivious to the war being fought in its shadows. Somewhere down there, the syndicate was preparing for Sonia's meeting, confident in their victory. Somewhere, Marissa was playing her role, unaware that everything was about to change. And somewhere, Adrian was finalizing the operation that would either save them all or end in disaster. Alara's phone buzzed, a message from Adrian. "Time to finish this." She typed back, "Together." His response was immediate. "Always." She stood there for one more moment, breathing in the cool night air, feeling the weight of what was coming. In a few hours, 15 teams would strike 15 targets. The syndicate would fracture, and either Adrian Volkov would step out of the shadows victorious, or they'd all disappear into graves that wouldn't even have their real names. Either way, the woman who'd noticed the wrong staff at a restaurant 3 months ago was gone. In her place was someone harder, sharper, capable of things she'd never imagined. Alara descended from the roof, went to join Adrian for the final briefing. The war was ending tomorrow, one way or another. The briefing room smelled like stale coffee and tension. Marcus had maps spread across every available surface, each one marked with targets, timelines, and escape routes that looked too optimistic when Alara studied them closely. 15 operations happening simultaneously across the city meant 15 chances for something to go catastrophically wrong. Adrian stood at the head of the table, looking at the faces of the team leads who'd be executing the strikes. These were people who'd worked for him for years, who'd stayed loyal even after his supposed death, who were now risking everything on a plan that required perfect timing and more than a little luck. Questions? Adrian asked after walking through the final details. A woman named Teresa raised her hand. Mid-40s, former military, the kind of person who asked the questions everyone else was thinking but too scared to voice. What happens if Sonia's meeting goes sideways? If she convinces them you're alive before we hit the targets? Then we're all dead, Adrian said flatly. Which is why timing matters. Her meeting is scheduled for 9 p.m. We strike at 8:45, all targets simultaneously. By the time she's presenting her evidence, their operations will already be burning. And if the evidence we planted isn't enough? This from a young guy named Carter, who handled their tech operations. If she's got something we don't know about? Adrian's jaw tightened. Then we adapt. But we're committed now. There's no walking this back. The room went quiet. Alara could see the fear on some faces, the determination on others. These people were about to commit acts that would make them enemies of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. No second chances. No do-overs. Dismissed, Adrian said. Get some rest. Tomorrow we end this. The team filtered out, leaving only Adrian, Alara, and Marcus. The big man looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot from 3 days of nonstop planning. I need you to do something for me, Adrian said to Marcus. If this goes wrong, if I don't make it, boss, don't listen to me. Adrian's voice cut through the protest. If I don't make it, you get Alara out. You get her somewhere safe, new identity, new life. You make sure she disappears so completely that even the syndicate's best can never find her. Understood? Marcus looked at Alara, then back at Adrian. Understood. Good. Now go get some sleep. You look like hell. After Marcus left, Alara moved to the window, stared out at the city that had become a chessboard where they were playing for their lives. You really think he'd leave you behind? I think he'd do what I ordered him to do. Adrian came to stand beside her. Because that's who he is. And what about what I want? Did you think to ask me if I'd run while you died? Alara, we're in this together, remember? That was the deal. We save each other. She turned to face him, saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he'd been carrying since the night at the restaurant. So stop planning contingencies where I survive without you. Either we both make it, or neither of us does. He pulled her close, and for a moment they just stood there, two people on the edge of something that would either save them or destroy them completely. When this is over, he said quietly, I'm taking you somewhere warm, somewhere with beaches and umbrella drinks and absolutely no criminal enterprises. Liar, you'd be bored in a week. Maybe, but I'd rather be bored and alive than interesting and dead. Alara almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. Tomorrow night, everything they'd built over the past 3 months would either succeed spectacularly or fail catastrophically. There was no middle ground. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Alara tried to eat breakfast but couldn't stomach more than toast and coffee. She checked and rechecked the communication protocols, the timing sequences, the backup plans for the backup plans. Everything had to be perfect, which meant everything was probably going to go wrong in ways they hadn't anticipated. At noon, Marcus received confirmation that Sonia Chen's meeting was still scheduled for 9 p.m. at the syndicate's downtown headquarters. At 1 p.m., they got word that she'd been spotted entering a data security facility, probably securing her evidence in a location where no one could tamper with it before the meeting. She's confident, Adrian observed, watching surveillance footage of Sonia leaving the facility. That's good. Confident people make mistakes. Or confident people are right, Alara countered. What if she really does have something we missed? Then we'll know in about 8 hours. At 3 p.m., Teresa called in. Her team was in position near one of the syndicate's major warehouses, waiting for the go signal. At 4, Carter confirmed that his people had access to the syndicate's server network and were ready to wipe their financial records the moment Adrian gave the word. At 5, 6, 7, the other teams checked in one by one. Everyone ready. Everyone waiting. Alara's hand shook as she pulled on the body armor that Marcus insisted she wear. It felt heavy, restrictive, a physical reminder that tonight could end in gunfire. Adrian was suiting up beside her, his movements practiced and efficient. "You don't have to come," he said without looking at her. "You could stay here, coordinate from safety. We've had this conversation." Alara's voice was steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "I'm coming." "Alara, if something happens to you, then you'll have bigger problems than my safety." She finished strapping the armor, checked the handgun that Marcus had taught her to use over the past month. She wasn't great with it, but she could hit a target at close range. Hopefully that would be enough. "Besides, you need me. I see things you miss, remember?" Adrian finally looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. "I can't lose you." "Then don't." She crossed to him, kissed him hard. "We finished this together." At 8 p.m., they moved to the command center, a converted office space 3 blocks from the syndicate's headquarters where they could monitor all 15 operations simultaneously. Screens covered every wall, showing feed from body cameras, security cameras they'd hacked, satellite imagery of the target locations. Marcus was already there, looking slightly more human after a few hours of sleep. "All teams report ready," he said. "Waiting on your go." Adrian checked his watch. 8:32. 13 minutes until they struck. Somewhere across the city, Sonia Chen was probably heading to the syndicate headquarters, confident she was about to expose the truth. She had no idea that in 13 minutes, everything she knew about the syndicate's operations was going to burn. "Sir, we have a problem." Carter's voice crackled over the comms, urgent. Sonia moved up her meeting. "It's happening now. They're gathering right now." Alara's stomach dropped. How is that possible? "We had confirmation it was 9 p.m. She lied about the time," Carter said. "Made everyone think it was later, so we wouldn't—" He stopped. "Boss, she knows. She knows we're planning something." The command center erupted into controlled chaos, team leads calling in, asking for orders, everyone talking at once. But Adrian had gone very still, his mind clearly racing through the implications. "She doesn't know everything," he said finally, his voice cutting through the noise. "If she knew everything, she wouldn't need a meeting. She'd just release the evidence and let us burn. But she's playing it safe, gathering the leadership first. Which means she suspects but can't prove it." "So what do we do?" Marcus asked. Adrian looked at the clock. 8:35. "We move now. All teams, execute immediately. I don't care if you're not in optimal position. I don't care if the timing's wrong. We hit them now before that meeting concludes." The next 5 minutes were chaos. On the screens, Alara watched 15 teams spring into action across the city. Warehouse doors blown open, security systems fried, armed men pouring into locations that had thought themselves untouchable. It was brutal, efficient, and completely lacking the coordination they'd planned for, which meant mistakes started happening immediately. Team 3 hit their warehouse and found it empty. The syndicate had moved the operation 2 days earlier, and they hadn't caught the change. Team 7 ran into twice the security they'd anticipated, got pinned down in a firefight that was supposed to last seconds but stretched into minutes. Team 10's tech specialist got locked out of the server they were supposed to wipe, triggering alarms that brought syndicate reinforcements pouring in. "We're losing control," Marcus said, watching the feeds. "Boss, we need to abort some of these—" "No." Adrian's voice was iron. "We're committed. Everyone pushes through." On the largest screen, Carter had managed to hack into the syndicate headquarters security system. Alara watched the conference room where Sonia's meeting was taking place. The syndicate's leadership sat around a table, 8 people who controlled billions in illegal operations, who'd ordered Adrian's death and thought they'd succeeded. Sonia stood at the head of the table, clearly mid-presentation. Even without audio, Alara could see her body language, confident, insistent, making her case with the precision of someone who'd spent weeks building it. Then one of the syndicate leader's phones rang, then another. Then all of them, a cascade of interruptions that made Sonia stop talking, confusion crossing her face. "They're getting reports of the hits," Carter said. "Real-time updates about their operations burning." On screen, the conference room dissolved into chaos. Leaders shouting into phones, Sonia trying to regain control, people standing, arguing, pointing fingers. One man, Viktor Petrov, the enforcer who'd viewed Adrian's body, pulled out a gun and aimed it at Sonia. "He thinks she's betraying them," Alara breathed. "He thinks this is her doing." The screens flickered as Carter lost and regained the feed. When the image stabilized, Victor had Sonia pinned against the wall, the gun pressed to her temple, other syndicate leaders trying to pull him off while simultaneously screaming orders into their phones. "Team 4 just secured the cash house," Marcus reported. 12 million in unmarked bills, all accounted for. Team 9 hit the drug warehouse, product destroyed, building burning. Team 12 accessed the server farm, financial records downloading now. One by one, the teams reported success. Not clean, not perfect, but successful. The syndicate's operations were collapsing in real time, and their leadership was too busy trying to figure out who was betraying them to mount an effective defense. Adrian watched it all with cold satisfaction. "How many teams have extracted?" 6 so far. The rest are in progress. Team 7 is still engaged, but they're holding. On the headquarters feed, Victor had been pulled off Sonia, but the damage was done. The syndicate's unity had shattered. They were looking at each other with suspicion, everyone wondering who'd orchestrated the simultaneous strikes, who'd turned traitor. "We need to move," Adrian said suddenly. "Marcus, get a team ready. We're going to the headquarters." "What?" "Boss, that's suicide. They're vulnerable right now, fractured. If we hit them while they're fighting each other, while they're weak—" "Adrian, no." Alara grabbed his arm. "That's not the plan. We hit their operations, bleed them dry from a distance. We don't walk into their headquarters while they're armed and paranoid." He turned to her, and she saw something dangerous in his eyes. "They tried to kill me. They used my own mother to do it. I want them to know who destroyed them. I want them to see my face before it's over." That's ego talking. That's revenge talking. That's not strategy. "Maybe I'm tired of strategy." His voice rose, the first time she'd heard him lose control since the night at the restaurant. "Maybe I'm tired of hiding, of playing dead, of letting them think they won. I want them to know they lost. I want them to know I'm the one who took everything from them." The command center had gone silent, everyone watching this confrontation unfold. Alara took a breath, forced herself to think past the fear, past the anger she could feel radiating from Adrian. "Okay," she said quietly. "You want them to know? We'll make them know. But we do it smart, not by walking into a building full of people who want you dead, but by using the one thing they can't ignore." "What?" She turned to Carter. "Can you get me access to their internal communications? Their phones, their network?" Carter's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Yeah, I can route through their compromised servers. Why?" Alara looked at Adrian. "Because we're going to introduce you. We're going to tell them exactly who's been destroying them for the past 3 months. And we're going to do it from right here, where they can't touch us." Understanding dawned on Adrian's face, followed by something that might have been respect. "You want to call them? I want you to call them. Victor specifically, the man who confirmed your death, who thought he was so clever. We call him, we put it on speaker in that conference room, and you tell them all exactly how badly they lost." Marcus was nodding. They're already paranoid, already turning on each other. Adrian's voice coming through their phones, explaining how he faked his death and spent 3 months dismantling their empire. That'll finish them. They'll tear themselves apart. Adrian considered for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the coldest thing Alara had ever seen. "Carter, make the call." It took 2 minutes for Carter to route the connection, to patch into the conference room speaker system. On the screen, they watched Victor pull out his phone, confused when it started ringing with a number he didn't recognize. He answered it, put it on speaker like Carter had programmed him to do. "Who is this?" Victor's voice came through scratchy but clear. Adrian leaned toward the microphone. "Hello, Victor. Did you enjoy my funeral?" The reaction on screen was immediate. Victor went pale. The other syndicate leaders froze. Sonia, still pinned against the wall, started laughing, a hysterical sound that echoed through the speakers. "That's impossible," Victor said. "You're dead. I saw the body." "You saw what I wanted you to see. A burned corpse, some convincing evidence, and my mother's very real grief. But me? I've been alive this whole time, watching you, planning this." One of the other leaders, a woman named Katerina who controlled their European operations, found her voice. "This is a trick. Someone's using a voice modulator. Is it a trick that your warehouse in District 7 is currently burning?" Adrian's voice was pleasant, conversational. "Or that your financial servers are being wiped as we speak? Is it a trick that you've lost an estimated $70 million in the past 15 minutes? The conference room descended into shouting again. Someone fired a gun, not at anyone, just into the ceiling, a desperate attempt to regain control. Victor was screaming into his phone, demanding to know where Adrian was, threatening to find him and finish the job. "You can't find me," Adrian said calmly. "You couldn't find me when you thought I was dead, and you can't find me now. But I found you. I found every operation, every account, every dirty deal you thought was secure. And over the past 3 months, I've been taking it all apart, piece by piece, while you celebrated my death." Alara watched Sonia on the screen. The intelligence chief had stopped laughing, was now staring at the phone with an expression of dawning horror. She'd been right. She'd suspected Adrian was alive, had gathered evidence, had called this meeting, and she'd been too late. "The irony," Adrian continued, "is that you forced my mother to betray me because you thought it would give you everything I'd built. But all you did was give me permission to destroy you without mercy, because a dead man has nothing to lose." "We'll hunt you forever," Victor snarled. "We'll find everyone you love, everyone who helped you." "With what resources?" Adrian laughed. "In the next hour, federal agents are going to receive anonymous tips about 12 of your major operations, complete with evidence, witness testimony, and financial records. By morning, half your leadership will be under arrest. The other half will be too busy trying to salvage what's left to worry about hunting anyone." He paused. Let that sink in. "Oh, and Victor? Remember when you viewed my body at the morgue? When you told my mother you were sorry for her loss? Did you know she was wearing a wire? I have a recording of you admitting to being at the scene of my supposed assassination. The FBI is going to find that very interesting." Victor's face went from pale to purple. He raised his gun, aimed it at the phone like he could shoot Adrian through the connection. But before he could do anything stupid, Katerina snatched the weapon from his hand. "Enough," she said, her voice tight. "Adrian Volkov, what do you want? Money? Territory? Tell us what it costs to make this stop." "You can't afford it," Adrian said, because what I want is your complete destruction. And as of tonight, I have it." He nodded to Carter, who cut the connection. On the screens, they watched the syndicate's leadership dissolve into chaos. Victor lunged at Sonia, probably blaming her for not stopping this sooner. Katerina was shouting orders into her phone, trying to verify the damage. Others were just staring at the dead phone, processing the reality that the man they'd killed was alive and had just orchestrated their downfall. "Teams report status," Marcus said into the comms. The responses came in one by one. Team 7 had finally extracted, 3 wounded but alive. Team 12 had downloaded 70% of the financial records before they had to cut and run. Team 3 had pivoted to a secondary target and secured it. Not perfect, but good enough. "All teams return to secondary safe houses," Marcus ordered. "Standard dispersal protocol. We'll rendezvous in 48 hours." As the teams signed off, Alara felt the adrenaline start to fade, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. They'd done it. 15 simultaneous strikes, all while the syndicate's leadership watched their empire burn in real time. It was brutal, messy, and nothing like the clean operation they'd planned. But it had worked. "The anonymous tips," she said to Adrian. "You really have evidence ready to send to the FBI? Carter's sending it now. Financial crimes, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder. Enough to keep federal prosecutors busy for years." Adrian leaned back in his chair, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in months. By tomorrow, the Novak Syndicate will be too busy fighting legal battles to worry about revenge. "Some of them will get away," Marcus warned. "People like Katerina, who have enough resources to disappear. They'll regroup, rebuild. Let them try." Adrian's voice was hard. They'll be starting from nothing, with every law enforcement agency in the country watching them. And if they come after me, they'll find out what happens when you give a dead man time to prepare. On the headquarters feed, the conference room was empty now except for Sonia, who sat alone at the table, her head in her hands. She'd been right about Adrian being alive, but her evidence had been too late, her timing off. She'd tried to save the syndicate and instead had been present for its destruction. "What about her?" Alara asked. Adrian studied the screen. "She's smart. She'll survive. Probably cut a deal with the FBI, testify against her former employers in exchange for immunity. The syndicate will hate her for it, but she'll be alive." "And your mother?" The question hung in the air. Adrian's expression didn't change, but Alara saw his jaw tighten. "What about her?" "She played her part, sold your death, helped us maintain the illusion. Are you going to—" Alara struggled to find the right words. "Are you going to see her? Tell her it's over?" "Why would I do that?" "Because she's your mother. Because despite everything, she thought she was protecting you in the only way she could. Because she tried to have me killed?" Adrian's voice was cold. "Because she made a deal with the people who wanted to destroy me?" "I don't care what her reasoning was, Alara. She made her choice. And you're making yours." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Adrian stood, started removing his body armor with sharp, angry movements. "We're done here. Marcus, make sure the cleanup protocols are followed. Alara and I are going to ground until this settles." "Where?" Marcus asked. "The Coast House, the one nobody knows about." Adrian looked at Alara. "Pack what you need. We leave in an hour." The Coast House turned out to be a small, weathered building perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, 3 hours north of the city. It was the kind of place that looked like it might blow away in a strong wind, but inside it was comfortable, even cozy. Adrian said he'd bought it years ago under a different name, a bolt hole that not even his closest associates knew existed. They arrived just after midnight, exhausted and wired from the night's events. Alara stood on the deck, listening to the waves crash against the rocks below, trying to process everything that had happened. In the space of 12 hours, they destroyed one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country, exposed their leadership to federal prosecution, and walked away without a scratch. It felt surreal. "You should sleep," Adrian said, joining her on the deck. He'd changed into civilian clothes, looked almost normal in jeans and a sweater. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see those screens, all those operations happening at once. What if we miss something? What if there's a team still in trouble, or Marcus would have called? All teams are secure. We won." "Did we?" Alara turned to face him. "The syndicate's broken, sure, but broken things can be rebuilt. And you've got a target on your back now that everyone knows you're alive. Let them try." He pulled her close, and she could feel the tension in his body despite his confident words. "Right now, we're untouchable. We've got evidence on anyone who might come after us, enough leverage to keep us safe for years. And if that's not enough, we disappear," Alara finished. "New names, new lives. You said—" "Would that be so bad? Starting over somewhere no one knows who we are or what we've done?" She thought about it. A quiet life, away from the violence and the constant threat of betrayal. It sounded nice. It also sounded impossible. "You'd be bored in a month." "Maybe, but I'd be alive." They stood there on the deck, watching the stars reflect off the dark water, two people who'd survived something that should have killed them. Alara knew this wasn't over. The syndicate might be broken, but pieces would remain. People like Katerina and Victor, who'd escaped the initial sweep, who'd be planning their own revenge. And Sonia, who knew too much and might decide that the best way to save herself was to give the FBI everything she knew about Adrian Volkov. But for tonight, they were safe. For tonight, they could breathe. "What about Marissa?" Alara asked again, unable to let it go. Adrian was quiet for a long time. "What do you want me to say? That I forgive her? That I understand why she did it?" "I want you to acknowledge that she's probably sitting in her house right now thinking her son is dead for real this time. That she sold your death so convincingly she convinced herself. Then she can live with that. The same way I have to live with knowing my own mother chose to save herself instead of fighting for me. She thought they'd kill you anyway. Thought at least this way it would be quick. You're defending her now? I'm saying that people make terrible choices when they're scared. That doesn't make those choices right, but it makes them human. Elara paused. You don't have to forgive her, but you could at least tell her you're alive. Let her have that much. Adrian pulled away, leaned against the deck railing, his back to her. For a minute, she thought he wasn't going to respond. Then he said very quietly, if I tell her I'm alive, she'll want to see me. And if I see her, I'll have to decide whether to forgive her or cut her out of my life forever. I'm not ready to make that choice. So you leave her in limbo instead? Let her grieve a son who isn't dead? For now, yes. He turned back to her, and in the moonlight she could see the pain he was trying to hide. Maybe that makes me cruel. Maybe it makes me weak. But I can't. His voice cracked. She was supposed to protect me. That's what mothers do. They protect their children, even when it costs them everything, and she chose to save herself instead. Elara crossed to him, put her arms around him, felt him shaking with emotion he'd been holding back for 3 months. Okay, she said softly. Okay. We don't tell her. Not yet. Thank you. They stayed like that for a while, holding each other on a deck overlooking the ocean, two people who'd won a war but were still processing the cost. Tomorrow they'd have to start planning the next phase, maintaining Adrian's death in the public eye while ensuring the syndicate's remaining members couldn't regroup. They'd have to decide what to do about the evidence they'd gathered, whether to release more to the FBI or hold it as insurance. But tonight, they were just two people who'd survived. Inside the house, Adrian's phone rang. He ignored it the first time. The second time, he checked the caller ID and frowned. It's Marcus. Something must be wrong. He answered, listened for 30 seconds, then his expression went cold. When? How many? A pause. Understood. We'll move at first light. What happened? Elara asked as he hung up. Sonia Chen is dead, found in her apartment an hour ago, single gunshot to the head, made to look like suicide. But it wasn't. No, Marcus says she was preparing to testify, had already made contact with the FBI. Someone in the syndicate got to her first. Elara's blood ran cold. Which means they're cleaning house, eliminating anyone who might talk, and sending a message that even though we broke them, they're not finished. Adrian's jaw set. Marcus is running protection on anyone who helped us, making sure they're secure. But Elara, if they're willing to kill Sonia, their own intelligence chief, they'll come for us eventually. So what do we do? He looked at her, and she saw the calculation in his eyes, the strategic mind that had kept him alive this long. We finish what we started. We don't just break the syndicate, we make sure it can never rebuild. Every remaining member, every operation, every dollar. We burn it all. That could take months, years. Then we have work to do. Elara thought about the quiet life they'd just been imagining, the fresh start that was already slipping away. But she'd known, even as they talked about it, that it was a fantasy. People like them didn't get to walk away. Not really. They'd chosen this path when they'd decided to fight back instead of run. Together, she said, echoing the promise they'd made 3 months ago in a different safe house. Together, he agreed. The ocean crashed against the cliffs below, endless and relentless. Somewhere in the city they'd left behind, federal agents were probably already executing warrants based on the anonymous tips Adrian had provided. Somewhere, the syndicate's remaining leadership was trying to figure out how to salvage their shattered empire. And somewhere, Marissa Volkov was living with the weight of what she'd done, believing her son was dead because she'd helped kill him. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a new phase, and Elara was ready for it. Dawn broke gray and cold over the ocean, the kind of morning that felt like the world was holding its breath. Elara hadn't slept. She'd spent the night on the deck, wrapped in a blanket, watching the horizon and thinking about Sonia Chen's body cooling in a city morgue 3 hours south. Adrian found her there, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his eyes red-rimmed but alert. Marcus called again. The FBI executed simultaneous raids on 8 syndicate locations at 4 a.m. They're calling it the biggest organized crime bust in a decade. How many arrests? 43 so far, including Katerina Volkov. He handed her a cup, sat beside her. She was trying to board a private jet to Moscow when they grabbed her. Ilara wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, let the steam rise against her face. What about Victor? In the wind, Marcus thinks he went underground the moment he realized what was happening. Could be anywhere by now. So he's still out there, still dangerous. Yes. Adrian stared at the ocean, his jaw tight. Which is why we can't stay here long. This place is secure, but nowhere's secure forever. Victor's smart enough to know I'd have backup locations, patient enough to wait for us to surface. Then we don't surface. Ilara turned to look at him. We stay dead. You stay dead. We rebuild from the shadows like we've been doing. For how long? A year? 5? The rest of our lives? He shook his head. I'm tired of hiding, Ilara. I want my life back. Your life was running a criminal empire. That empire doesn't exist anymore. You can't go back to something that's already gone. The words hung between them, harsh but true. Adrian had spent 3 months dismantling everything he'd built, every connection, every operation. He'd done it to survive, to destroy the syndicate before they destroyed him. But in the process, he'd also destroyed the infrastructure that had made him powerful. Then what do I go back to? His voice was quiet, almost lost. Who am I if I'm not Adrian Volkov? You're the man who survived an assassination attempt, faked his own death, and took down one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. You're the man who's sitting here drinking coffee instead of rotting in a grave. She reached for his hand. You're whoever you choose to be next. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Marcus again. Adrian answered on speaker. Boss, we've got a situation. Marissa Volkov just held a press conference. Ilara's stomach dropped. What? Turn on the news, any channel. She's everywhere. Adrian grabbed the remote, flicked on the television inside the house. Every major network was carrying the same footage. Marissa Volkov, dressed in black, standing behind a podium with a dozen microphones pointed at her face. She looked frail, older than her years, but her voice was steady. Can no longer stay silent about what happened to my son. Adrian Volkov did not die in a random act of violence. He was murdered by the Novak Syndicate, a criminal organization that has operated with impunity in this city for decades. And I helped them do it. The press erupted in shouted questions. Marissa held up a hand, waited for silence. 3 months ago, members of the syndicate approached me with evidence of illegal activities within my son's business operations. They threatened to destroy everything he'd built unless I cooperated with them. They wanted Adrian dead, and they wanted me to deliver him to his execution. Her voice cracked. I was a coward. I was terrified of losing everything I'd spent my life building. So I agreed. I brought my own son to that restaurant knowing what would happen, and I've had to live with that every day since. Adrian had gone very still beside Ilara, his knuckles white around the coffee cup. But I can't live with it anymore, Marissa continued. My son is dead because of my choices. The least I can do is make sure the people who orchestrated his murder face justice. I've turned over to the FBI every piece of evidence I have. Recordings of my conversations with syndicate members, documents proving their involvement, testimony about how they coerced me into cooperation. I know this won't bring Adrian back. I know it won't erase what I did. But maybe it will prevent them from doing this to another family. She stepped back from the podium, ignored the barrage of questions from reporters, walked away with her head high and her shoulders straight. The broadcast cut to anchors analyzing what they'd just heard, legal experts weighing in on whether Marissa could face charges herself, but Adrian had already turned off the television. The silence in the room was absolute. She just painted a target on her back, Marcus said through the phone. Victor and anyone else who escaped the raids, they'll come for her now. She's a witness against them, and she just announced it to the world. Get protection on her, Adrian said, his voice hollow. Around the clock. I don't care what it costs. Boss, are you sure? After what she did? I'm sure. Do it. He ended the call, set the phone down with careful precision. She's trying to make amends. She's trying to get herself killed, Ilara corrected. The syndicate won't let her testimony stand. They'll make an example of her. I know. Adrian stood, paced to the window, stared out at the ocean without seeing it. She's doing this because she thinks I'm dead. She thinks this is the only way to honor my memory, to make up for what she did. And she has no idea that I'm watching, that I could stop this if you just revealed you're alive, Alara finished. But the moment you do that, everything we've built falls apart. The syndicate will know you're the one who's been destroying them. Victor will stop running and start hunting. And Marissa's testimony becomes worthless because she's been lying about your death for 3 months. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. So I let her walk into danger, let her risk her life trying to avenge a son who isn't dead, because the alternative is worse? Yes. Alara stood, moved to join him at the window. Unless you want to throw away everything we've accomplished, unless you want to hand Victor exactly what he needs to justify coming after everyone who helped us. There has to be another way. There isn't. Not one that keeps everyone safe. She took his hand, felt it trembling. Your mother made her choice. Now you have to make yours. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in watching a situation spiral beyond control. Marissa's press conference had unleashed a media firestorm. Every network was running retrospectives on Adrian's supposed death. Investigative journalists were digging into the syndicate's operations, and the FBI was fielding calls from dozens of witnesses who suddenly felt brave enough to come forward. Meanwhile, Marcus's team worked overtime trying to keep Marissa alive. They'd placed guards at her house, her office, every location she frequented. But Marissa wasn't making it easy. She gave 3 more interviews in 2 days, each one more damning than the last, each one a bigger provocation to the syndicate's remaining members. She's got a death wish, Marcus reported on the 3rd day. My people are good, but boss, she's actively trying to be visible. It's like she wants them to come for her. Adrian listened to this from the coast house, his expression unreadable. He'd barely left the deck in 3 days, spending hours staring at the ocean like it held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. Maybe she does, Alara said when Marcus hung up. Maybe she thinks dying for your memory is the only way to balance the scales. That's insane. Is it? You won't forgive her. You won't even acknowledge she's trying to make amends. From her perspective, what else does she have to live for? Adrian turned to her, anger flashing in his eyes. So this is my fault now. She tried to have me killed, but I'm the bad guy because I won't absolve her? I'm not saying that. I'm saying people do desperate things when they can't live with their guilt, and your mother is drowning in it. They stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Then Adrian's phone rang again. Not Marcus this time, a number he didn't recognize. He answered it anyway. Yes? Adrian Volkov. The voice was male, accented, unfamiliar. Or should I say the ghost of Adrian Volkov? Every muscle in Adrian's body went rigid. Who is this? Someone who knows you're alive. Someone who's been watching your mother throw herself on her sword for the past 3 days, wondering when you'd get tired of the performance and step in. A pause. My name is Dmitry Orlov. Perhaps you've heard of me? Alara saw Adrian's face go pale. She mouthed the name, confused, but Adrian was already putting the phone on speaker. I know who you are, Adrian said carefully. Your syndicate leadership, Eastern European operations. Was syndicate leadership, Dmitry corrected, until your little campaign destroyed everything we built. I lost 17 operations, 300 million in assets, and a decade of careful networking because of you. So yes, I know you're alive. And I know you're the one who's been burning us down. If you know that, why are you calling instead of sending people to kill me? Dmitry laughed, a sound without humor. Because I'm a businessman, Mr. Volkov, and right now you and I have a common problem named Viktor Petrov. Adrian's eyes met Alara's. She could see him calculating, trying to figure out the angle. I'm listening. Victor is old guard. He believes in revenge, in blood for blood. He wants you dead, not because it's good business, but because you embarrassed him, made him look weak. Dmitry's voice hardened. But he's also reckless. His obsession with you is drawing federal attention to all of us. Every operation he touches, every move he makes trying to find you, it compromises what's left of our organization. So you want me to kill him for you? I want to propose a trade. You eliminate Victor permanently. In return, I ensure the remaining syndicate members leave you, your wife, and your mother alone. Complete amnesty. You go your way, we go ours. Why would I trust you? Because I'm offering you something Victor never will. An end to this. Right now, you're looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Every car that follows you too long, every stranger who looks twice, every phone call from an unknown number. That's no way to live, Mr. Volkov. I'm offering you peace. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. And what's to stop you from coming after me once Victor's dead? Nothing, except that I'm smart enough to know you've got insurance, evidence, leverage, people positioned to hurt us if anything happens to you. Victor's too angry to think about that. I'm not. Dmitri paused. Besides, you've already proven you can destroy us from the shadows. Why would I want to give you a reason to do it again? I need to think about it. You have 24 hours. After that, Victor's people will have tracked down your mother's security detail. They'll make their move, probably during her next public appearance. And when they do, they won't be subtle. They'll make it messy, public. A message to anyone who thinks about testifying against us. The call ended. Adrian set down the phone, ran his hands through his hair. He's right. About all of it. You can't seriously be considering this, Alara said. It's obviously a trap. Is it? Everything he said makes sense. Victor is a liability to what's left of the syndicate. And if Dmitri wanted to trap me, there are easier ways than a phone call offering amnesty. Or it's exactly what he'd do if he wanted to draw you out. Get you to surface, to make a move, and then take you down. She grabbed his arm. Adrian, we've been careful for 3 months. We've stayed hidden, worked from the shadows. The moment you go after Victor directly, you expose yourself. I'm already exposed. Dmitri knows I'm alive. How long before others figure it out? How long before Victor puts it together? Adrian pulled away, paced the small room. And what about my mother? Dmitri's right about that too. Victor will go after her, and when he does, people will die. Marissa, Marcus's security team, probably innocent bystanders. All because I'm hiding. So what's your plan? Walk up to Victor and put a bullet in his head? Even if you could find him, even if you got close enough, you'd be starting a war with whatever's left of the syndicate. Unless Dmitri's telling the truth. Unless he really does want Victor gone and is willing to trade my safety for it. Alara wanted to scream. This was exactly the kind of thinking that got people killed. Trusting the enemy because the alternative was too complicated. You don't know this man. You don't know if you can trust him. I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore. Adrian's voice was flat, exhausted. But I know I can't keep hiding while my mother puts herself in danger trying to avenge me. I know I can't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when Victor will finally find me. And I know that if Dmitri's offering a way out, I at least have to consider it. The next morning, Adrian called Dmitri back. Alara listened from across the room, her stomach in knots as they worked out the details. Dmitri would provide Victor's current location, a warehouse on the north side where he was supposedly coordinating the remaining syndicate operations. In return, Adrian would handle the problem permanently. No witnesses, no loose ends, no complications. There's one more thing, Dmitri said. I need proof. Victor's body isn't enough. He could fake his death the same way you did. I need something that can't be falsified. What did you have in mind? Victor has a very distinctive tattoo on his right forearm, Russian military insignia from his time in Spetsnaz. Bring me that, and we have a deal. Adrian ended the call, looked at Alara. I know what you're going to say. Do you? Because I'm pretty sure you don't. She crossed the room, got in his face. This is suicide. Even if Dmitri's location is accurate, even if Victor's really there, you'll be walking into a defended position with no backup and no exit strategy. You'll get yourself killed, and for what? A promise from a man who has every reason to want you dead? I'll have backup. Marcus and his team, who are currently protecting your mother because you ordered them to. You pull them off her, and Victor hits her instead. You can't be in two places at once, Adrian. He grabbed her shoulders, and for the first time since the night at the restaurant, she saw real fear in his eyes. Then help me figure this out. Because I can't keep living like this. I can't keep being dead. Alara took a breath, forced herself to think past the emotion, past the fear. Okay. If we're doing this, and I'm not saying we should, but if we're doing this, we do it smart. We don't trust Dimitri's intelligence. We verify it ourselves first. We don't go in without backup, and we don't assume this is a simple assassination. We plan for every contingency, every way this could go wrong. Agreed? And we tell Marcus, no secrets, no surprises. He deserves to know what we're planning. Adrian nodded. Call him. Marcus's reaction to the plan was exactly what Alara expected. This is the worst idea you've ever had, and that's saying something considering you faked your own death. Noted, Adrian said. Now tell me how to make it work. Over the next 12 hours, they built a plan that was slightly less suicidal than Adrian's original impulse. Marcus would keep half his team on Marissa, but pull the other half to provide backup for Adrian's operation. They'd do reconnaissance on the warehouse Dimitri had identified, verify Victor was actually there, map the security, identify escape routes. Meanwhile, Alara would stay at the coast house, monitoring communications, ready to call in additional support if things went sideways. She hated that part, staying behind while Adrian walked into danger, but someone needed to maintain operational oversight, and she was the only one Adrian trusted completely. I don't like being the one who sits and waits, she told him the night before the operation. I don't like the idea of you anywhere near a firefight, he countered. So we're both unhappy. At least we're consistent. This isn't funny. I know. He pulled her close, held her tight. If something goes wrong, nothing's going wrong. You're going to verify Victor's there. You're going to handle it, and you're going to come back. That's the plan. Alara, that's the plan, she repeated, her voice fierce. You don't get to do the noble sacrifice thing. You don't get to tell me goodbye like you're not coming back. We're past that. He kissed her, hard and desperate, like a man trying to memorize the moment. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I love you. In case I haven't said it enough. You haven't, but you can make up for it when you get back. The warehouse was exactly where Dimitri said it would be, a sprawling industrial complex on the north edge of the city that had seen better days. Marcus's advance team confirmed Victor's presence. They'd gotten eyes on him through a second-story window, directing operations, very much alive and very much in charge of what remained of the syndicate's local operations. Security is heavy but not impossible, Marcus reported over the encrypted channel. 12 guys we've counted, probably more inside. Victor's got an office on the second floor, southeast corner. Only one entrance to that floor, easy to defend, but also easy to trap someone in if this goes wrong. Escape routes? Adrian asked. He was wearing tactical gear, armed like he was going to war, which Alara supposed he was. Fire escape on the north side, loading dock in the back. But boss, if they lock this place down, you're looking at a siege situation. My guys can provide suppressing fire from outside, but we can't get you out if you're pinned. Understood. What about Dimitri's people? No sign of them. Either they're really good at hiding or Dimitri's full of it and this is a setup. Adrian checked his watch. Midnight. The operation was scheduled for 12:30, when the warehouse would theoretically be at minimum staffing. Alara, you reading me? Back at the coast house, Alara adjusted her headset. I've got you. All channels clear. Backup team standing by. Adrian, you don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. She heard him take a breath. Okay, Marcus, deploy your team. Let's finish this. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Alara's life. She watched through the surveillance feeds Marcus's team had set up, listened to the terse communications as Adrian and 3 of Marcus's best moved into the warehouse. They cleared the first floor room by room, took down 2 guards with suppressed weapons, moved like ghosts through a building that should have been impenetrable. Then they reached the stairs to the second floor, and everything went wrong. The explosion ripped through the stairwell, the sound like thunder even through the surveillance feed. Alara screamed Adrian's name, heard nothing but static in response. On the screen, smoke and debris filled the camera frame, making it impossible to see what had happened. Marcus, report! She shouted into the comms. We've got a man down. No, 2 down. Boss is static. Trapped on the second floor. The stairs are gone, completely destroyed, and we've got reinforcements pouring in from the back entrance. This was a setup. Alara's hands shook as she tried to coordinate, tried to think past the panic. Can you get to him? Not without going through 30 armed men. Alara, we need to pull back. You pull back and you leave him to die. If we stay, we all die. The whole building's wired. That explosion was just the first. Whoever set this up wanted to make sure. Another explosion cut him off. Then another. On the screens, Alara watched the warehouse start to collapse, floors pancaking into each other, fire blooming in the wreckage. She was screaming Adrian's name, begging him to respond, but there was nothing. Just silence and smoke and the awful certainty that she'd just watched the man she loved die. Then, through the static, a voice. Weak, pained, but unmistakably Adrian's. Alara, can you hear me? Adrian, oh God, are you hurt? Where are you? Second floor, office, the explosion? He coughed, the sound wet and wrong. Dmitri played us. The whole thing was a trap. He wanted me to come here so he could... Another cough. So he could finish what Victor started. Marcus is coming for you. Just hold on. No. Tell him to pull back. The building's collapsing and there are charges everywhere. If he comes in, he dies too. Adrian's breathing was labored. Alara, listen to me. There's a safe in this office. Documents, evidence, everything I've collected on the syndicate. You need to get it. Use it to... Stop talking like you're dead. You're not dead. I won't let you be dead. I love you. His voice was fading. Tell my mother. Tell her I understand. Tell her I forgive. The line went silent. On the screens, the warehouse continued to burn, continued to collapse, and Alara watched it happen with tears streaming down her face. Watched the building that had become Adrian's tomb turn into an inferno that would leave nothing behind. Marcus was shouting orders to fall back, his team retreating as more explosions rocked the structure. And Alara sat in the coast house 3 hours away, completely helpless, listening to the man she loved die. Then her phone rang. Not the encrypted line, her personal cell. Unknown number. She answered it with shaking hands. Yes? Mrs. Vance. Dmitri Orlov's voice was smooth, pleased. I thought you should know that your husband died bravely. He walked into my trap with his eyes open, knowing the risks. That's admirable in its way. You son of a... Now, language. I simply did what the syndicate should have done 3 months ago. Adrian Volkov is dead, for real this time. And you, my dear, are going to make sure the world knows it. Why would I do anything you say? Because if you don't, I'll release evidence proving that Adrian faked his death, that he and his mother lied to everyone for months, that every arrest made because of Marissa's testimony was based on fraudulent pretenses. The FBI will look foolish, the cases will fall apart, and your mother-in-law will go to prison for obstruction of justice. Dmitri paused. Or you could confirm that Adrian really did die tonight in a tragic accident while trying to avenge himself against Viktor Petrov. The story writes itself. And in return, I'll leave you alone. You can grieve, you can rebuild your life, and you'll never hear from me again. Alara closed her eyes. You're asking me to let you get away with murder. I'm offering you a chance to protect what's left of your family. Choose wisely, Mrs. Vance. You have until morning. The call ended. Alara sat in the silent house, listening to the ocean, feeling like her entire world had collapsed around her. Adrian was dead. Really, truly dead this time. And she was the only one who could decide what story the world would believe about how it happened. Her phone rang again. Marcus. Alara, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it coming. Should have... Is there any chance? Her voice sounded hollow, distant. Any chance at all he survived? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The building's still burning. We can't get close enough to search for survivors. But Alara, the way it collapsed, the intensity of the fire, just tell me, is there a chance? No. His voice broke. I'm sorry. There's no chance. Alara ended the call. She walked out onto the deck, stared at the ocean that Adrian had stared at for 3 days, trying to find answers. And she realized that for the first time in 3 months, she was completely alone. The woman who'd noticed the wrong staff at a restaurant was long gone. The woman who'd helped orchestrate the destruction of the Novak syndicate had disappeared into smoke. What was left was someone who'd lost everything and had to decide what to do with the pieces. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A single image, Adrian's military tattoo, the one he'd gotten before his father died, photographed next to today's newspaper. Proof of death. Dmitri wasn't taking any chances. Alara looked at the photo for a long time. Then she made her decision. She would tell the world that Adrian Volkov had died trying to avenge himself. She would protect Marissa's testimony, ensure the syndicate members who'd been arrested stayed arrested. She would do what Adrian would have wanted, make sure his death meant something. But she would also do something Adrian hadn't planned for. She would survive. She would remember. And someday, when Dmitry Orlov felt safe enough to stop looking over his shoulder, she would make him pay for every lie he'd told and every life he'd destroyed. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The funeral was smaller this time. No media circus, no public spectacle. Just Marissa Volkov standing beside a closed casket, her face carved from stone, while a priest said words that meant nothing to anyone present. Alara stood 3 feet away, dressed in black, her eyes dry because she'd cried herself empty over the past week. Marcus stood behind them both, silent and watchful, scanning the small gathering of mourners for threats that probably weren't coming. Dmitri had gotten what he wanted. There was no reason to disturb a widow's grief. When it was over, when the casket had been lowered into the ground beside Adrian's father, Marissa finally looked at Alara. Her eyes were hollow, ancient. Did he suffer? The question Alara had been dreading. She thought about the last conversation, Adrian's labored breathing, the sound of the building collapsing around him. I don't know, she said honestly. He told me he loved me. He told me to tell you he understood, that he forgave you. Marissa's composure shattered. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside her. I killed him, twice. I killed my son twice. No. Alara's voice was firm. Dmitry Orlov killed him. The syndicate killed him. You tried to save him the only way you knew how. By betraying him. By staying alive long enough to testify against the people who wanted him dead. By making sure some of them went to prison. That's not nothing, Marissa. The older woman looked up, tears streaming down her face. Why are you being kind to me after everything I did? Because Adrian forgave you, and because hating you won't bring him back. Alara took a breath, tasted ash and grief. He loved you. Even when he couldn't say it, even when he was angry, he loved you. And he understood why you did what you did, even if he couldn't accept it while he was alive. Marissa reached for her hand, gripped it with surprising strength. What will you do now? I don't know yet. The truth. Alara had spent a week trying to figure out what came next, what her life looked like without Adrian in it. But I'm not running. I'm not hiding. That's not what he would have wanted. They stood there beside the grave, 2 women bound by the same loss, the same man who'd changed both their lives in different ways. Around them, the other mourners drifted away, giving them privacy. Only Marcus remained, a silent sentinel. Eventually, Marissa left too, walking to her car with the careful steps of someone who'd aged a decade in a month. Marcus approached, his expression grim. We need to talk, not here. They met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the cemetery, a generic chain place where nobody would recognize them or care. Marcus ordered 2 coffees neither of them would drink, and led Alara to a corner booth. I've been digging into Dmitry Orlov, he said without preamble, trying to figure out how he knew Adrian was alive, how he planned the trap, and I found something. Alara's exhausted brain struggled to engage. What? Sonia Chen. Before she died, she'd made contact with Dmitry, sent him everything she'd found about Adrian's faked death, all her evidence. She was trying to buy her way back into the syndicate's good graces by giving them what they wanted most, proof Adrian was alive. So Dmitry knew all along. From the moment we made that first phone call to Victor, Dmitry was listening, planning. He let us think we were destroying the syndicate, when really we were just clearing out his competition. Victor, Katerina, everyone who got arrested or killed, they were obstacles to Dmitry taking complete control. Marcus's jaw tightened. We did his work for him. The boss spent 3 months dismantling his enemies, And Dmitri just waited for the perfect moment to eliminate the one person who could challenge him. Elara felt sick. Adrian died for nothing. Adrian died because he trusted the wrong person, because he wanted his life back badly enough to believe a lie. Marcus leaned forward. But Elara, there's something else. Something the boss set up before he died that he never told anyone about. Not even you. What are you talking about? Marcus pulled out a tablet, opened a secure email. I found this in the boss's encrypted files. It's dated the day before the warehouse operation. Instructions to be carried out only if he died. Elara read the email, her heart pounding. Adrian had anticipated betrayal. He'd planned for the possibility that Dmitri was lying, that the warehouse was a trap, and he'd set up a contingency that would activate upon his death. Every piece of evidence he'd collected on the syndicate, including information on Dmitry Orlov that hadn't been turned over to the FBI, would be released to multiple news organizations, law enforcement agencies, and international watchdog groups. Financial crimes, corruption, connections to politicians and businessmen, everything. This goes live in 72 hours, Marcus said. Unless someone with the access code stops it, the boss gave those codes to only one person. Who? You. Elara stared at the screen, her mind reeling. Adrian had trusted her with the final move, the last play. He'd known he might not survive, and he'd made sure she would have the power to finish what he'd started. If this releases, Marcus continued, Dimitri's empire crumbles. Everything he gained by killing Adrian, all the power he consolidated, gone. He'll be arrested within days. But Elara, it also means exposing things about Adrian's own operations. Things that could complicate Marissa's testimony, that could hurt people who were just trying to survive in that world. Adrian knew that. He planned for it anyway, because he wanted to make sure that if he died, he took them all down with him. No mercy, no second chances. Marcus looked at her steadily. But you have the codes. You get to decide if this happens or not. The boss trusted you to make the call. Elara closed her eyes. She could stop it. She could let Dmitri win, let him live with the empire he'd built on Adrian's corpse. She could protect the people who'd helped them, keep them safe from legal complications. She could choose mercy, or she could let Adrian's final play execute. She could make Dmitri pay for every lie, every death, every manipulation. She could burn down everything he'd gained, even if it meant burning other things too. What would Adrian want? She asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. He'd want you to destroy them all, every last one, no matter the cost. That's not what I asked. I asked what he'd want, not what he'd do. She opened her eyes, looked at Marcus. Would he want me to become the kind of person who chooses revenge over everything else? Who sacrifices innocent people to punish the guilty? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The boss I knew 3 months ago? Yeah, he would have. But the boss who sat on that deck at the Coast House, who talked about starting over, who forgave his mother right before he died, he shook his head. I think that man would want you to choose whatever lets you sleep at night. Elara thought about Adrian's last words. Not orders, not strategy, just love, forgiveness, and a request that she tell his mother he understood. That was who he'd been at the end. Not the ruthless crime lord, not the strategist who planned 10 moves ahead, just a man who'd learned that some things mattered more than winning. I need 48 hours, she said. Can you delay the release that long? What are you planning? Something Adrian would probably think is stupid. She stood, left money for the untouched coffees. Trust me. The next morning, Elara walked into the FBI field office downtown and asked to speak with the agent in charge of the Novak syndicate case. She was escorted to a conference room where a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s waited, introducing herself as Special Agent Catherine Rivera. Mrs. Vance, I'm sorry for your loss. Your husband's death was a murder, Elara interrupted. Orchestrated by a man named Dmitry Orlov, who's currently consolidating control over what's left of the syndicate. And I can prove it. Rivera's expression didn't change, but Elara saw the interest spark in her eyes. I'm listening. For the next hour, Elara laid it all out. The phone call from Dmitry, the setup at the warehouse, the evidence that Sonia Chen had provided him. She explained how Dmitri had used Adrian's desire to end the conflict to lure him into a trap, how he'd manipulated the entire situation to eliminate his competition within the syndicate. "And you're telling me this why?" Rivera asked when Alara finished. "If you have evidence of a crime, why come forward now?" "Because my husband left behind information that could take down everyone involved in the syndicate, including Dmitri. But releasing it publicly would hurt people who don't deserve to be hurt. It would complicate cases you've already built, make things messy." Alara leaned forward. "I'm offering you a trade. I give you everything Adrian collected on Dmitry Orlov. And I mean everything, enough to put him away for life. In return, you leave the rest of it alone. You don't dig into Adrian's operations. You don't question Marissa Volkov's testimony. You just focus on the people who are actually still operating." "Okui? Ursastan." Rivera studied her. "You're protecting your mother-in-law." "I'm protecting everyone who got caught up in something bigger than they understood. Marissa made mistakes, but she's trying to make amends. The people who worked for Adrian, most of them were just trying to survive. Going after them now, when the real threats are people like Dmitri, that's not justice. That's just revenge." "And what about justice for your husband?" "Justice for my husband is making sure the man who killed him doesn't get to profit from it. Dmitry Orlov murdered Adrian and made it look like an accident. He used the FBI's investigation as cover to eliminate his rivals. If that's not something worth prosecuting, I don't know what is." Rivera was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'll need to see this evidence before I can make any promises." Alara pulled out a flash drive, slid it across the table. "Financial records, communications, witness statements. Everything you need to build an airtight case against Dmitry Orlov. And if you move fast before he realizes what's happening, you can catch him before he runs." Rivera took the flash drive, turned it over in her hands. "Your husband was a criminal, Mrs. Vance. He ran an organization that hurt people, that profited from suffering. Why should I care if another criminal took him out? Because it matters who we hold accountable and why. Because choosing to punish the powerful instead of just the convenient is what separates justice from revenge." Alara stood. "Adrian was a lot of things. Some of them were terrible. But he died trying to end a war that had already cost too many lives. Dmitri killed him to start a new one. Those things aren't the same." She left the FBI office not knowing if Rivera would take the deal, not knowing if anything she'd said had made a difference. But she'd made her choice. She'd chosen the path that protected people instead of punishing them, the path that Adrian had pointed to with his last words about forgiveness. The evidence release deadline came and went without action. Alara had used Adrian's codes to stop it, to lock away the information that would have destroyed Dmitri but also hurt everyone else. Instead, she'd gambled on the FBI, on Agent Rivera's sense of justice. For 3 days, nothing happened. Alara stayed at the Coast House, alone with her grief, wondering if she'd made the right choice or just given Dmitri exactly what he wanted. Then Marcus called. "Turn on the news. Any channel." Alara grabbed the remote, flicked on the television. Every network was covering the same story: simultaneous FBI raids on Dmitry Orlov's operations across 3 states. Arrests, seizures, frozen assets. The anchor was calling it the final chapter in the Novak syndicate investigation, the capture of the organization's last remaining leader. On screen, Dmitry was being led out of a building in handcuffs, his usual composed expression cracked by genuine fear. Federal agents swarmed around him, carrying boxes of evidence, loading vehicles with seized property. "They got him," Marcus said, something like wonder in his voice. "Agent Rivera used everything you gave her. She coordinated with international agencies, got warrants executed in 4 countries simultaneously. Dmitry's done. Completely done." Alara watched the man who'd killed Adrian being pushed into a federal vehicle, watched his empire collapse in real time. She waited to feel satisfaction, triumph, vindication. Instead, she just felt tired. "What about Victor?" she asked. "Found dead in a hotel room in Budapest yesterday. Single gunshot to the head. Dmitry probably ordered it before he got arrested, tying up loose ends." Marcus paused. "It's over, Alara. The syndicate's finished. For real this time." After Marcus hung up, Alara sat in the quiet house listening to the ocean, thinking about everything that had happened since that night at the restaurant 4 months ago. She'd started this as someone who noticed things, who saw what others missed. She'd ended it as someone who'd helped destroy a criminal empire, who'd lost the man she loved, and who'd chosen mercy when revenge would have been easier. Adrian would have been proud of her, or disappointed, probably both. Her phone rang. Marissa. "I saw the news," the older woman said. "They arrested Dmitry Orlov. Did you?" "I gave the FBI what they needed to build their case. The rest was up to them." Alara walked out onto the deck, felt the salt air on her face. "It's over, Marissa. All of it." "What will you do now?" The question everyone kept asking. Alara looked out at the endless ocean, thought about the life she'd built with Adrian, the person she'd become in his world. She could stay in that world, use the skills she'd learned, the connections she'd made, or she could walk away, try to find whoever she'd been before all this. "I'm going to disappear, she said finally. "Not because I'm hiding, but because I want to. I want to be someone who isn't defined by what happened, who gets to choose what comes next." "That sounds lonely." "Maybe. But Adrian taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start over. He did it when he faked his death. I'm doing it now that he's really gone." Alara paused. "What about you? Will you be okay?" Marissa's laugh was bitter. "I spent my whole life building an empire. Now it's gone. My son is gone, and all I have left is the truth of what I did. I'll never be okay, but I'll survive. That's what we do, isn't it? We survive." They said goodbye without making plans to stay in touch. Some relationships were forged in fire and couldn't exist outside of it. Marissa would rebuild her life around her testimony, her public penance. She'd spend whatever years she had left trying to balance the scales for her son's death. And Alara would do what she'd told Marissa. She'd disappear, she'd start over, and she'd try to build a life that wasn't about survival or strategy or seeing the danger before it struck. A week later, Marcus drove her to a private airfield. Her bags were packed, her new identity secured. Not the fake kind that criminals used, but a legitimate fresh start. She was leaving the country, heading somewhere warm where nobody knew her name or her history. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked as they waited for the plane. "The boss left you money, enough to never work again. You could stay, rebuild." "Rebuild what?" "Adrian's empire is gone, the syndicate's gone. There's nothing left to rebuild." She looked at him, this man who'd been loyal to Adrian until the end and had extended that loyalty to her. "What about you? What comes next?" "I've got offers, security work mostly. Boring compared to what we did, but boring sounds good right now." "Tanki tisati nas." He smiled, tired. "Besides, someone's got to make sure Mrs. Volkov doesn't do anything stupid. The boss would have wanted that." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the plane being prepped. Then Marcus said, "He loved you, in case there's any doubt. The boss had walls around his heart that most people never got past. But you got all the way through. That meant something." "I know." Alara's voice was thick. "I just wish I'd had more time with the version of him that could say it. You had exactly the time you needed, and you made it count." The pilot signaled that they were ready. Alara picked up her bags, turned to say goodbye, but Marcus pulled her into a hug first. "Stay safe, and if you ever need anything, I know where to find you." She boarded the plane alone, settled into the seat, watched the city disappear below as they climbed. Somewhere down there, Dmitry Orlov was sitting in a cell, facing charges that would keep him locked up for the rest of his life. Somewhere, Marissa Volkov was learning to live with the weight of her choices. And somewhere, in a grave beside his father, Adrian Volkov was at rest. Alara closed her eyes and let herself remember him not as the strategic criminal or the man who'd faked his death, but as the person who'd sat on a deck overlooking the ocean and talked about umbrella drinks and boring safety. That's who he'd wanted to be at the end. Someone who'd earned the right to be ordinary. She hoped he'd found that peace, wherever he was now. The flight attendant asked if she needed anything. Alara shook her head, turned to look out the window at the clouds. She was flying towards something unknown, leaving behind everything she'd built over the past 4 months. Most people would call that running away. But Alara had learned that sometimes walking away from a war you'd won was braver than staying to rule the ashes. Adrian had fought his whole life, had built empires and destroyed them, had survived assassination attempts and betrayals. And what had it gotten him? A grave before he was 40 and a legacy of violence that would take years to clean up. She didn't want that. She wanted what he'd wanted at the end: peace, simplicity, the chance to be someone who wasn't always looking over their shoulder. Her phone buzzed. One last message from Marcus, sent just before they left cellular range. A photo of Adrian from before everything went wrong, before the restaurant, before the fake death. He was smiling, really smiling, the kind of expression that made him look younger and less dangerous. The caption read, "Remember him like this." Alara saved the photo, tucked the phone away, and let herself cry. Not the desperate tears of fresh grief, but the quieter sadness of letting go. She'd loved Adrian Volkov. She'd helped him fight his war, had stood beside him when the world wanted him dead. And when he'd finally died for real, she'd chosen to honor his last words about forgiveness, instead of giving in to the easier path of revenge. That choice had cost her. It had meant letting Dmitry live long enough for the FBI to arrest him, instead of releasing evidence that would have destroyed him immediately. It had meant trusting the justice system instead of taking justice into her own hands. It had meant being the kind of person who chose mercy when fury would have felt so much more satisfying. But it had also meant she could walk away with a clear conscience. She hadn't become the monster Adrian's world tried to make everyone into. She'd stayed human, stayed someone who believed that how you won mattered as much as whether you won. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude. The flight attendant returned with a drink Alara hadn't ordered. Whiskey, neat, the way Adrian used to drink it. She looked at the woman, confused. "Compliments of Mr. Marcus, eh?" the attendant explained. "He called ahead, said you'd understand." Alara understood. It was a toast, a goodbye, an acknowledgement of everything that had been lost and everything that had been learned. She raised the glass to the window, to the sky, to wherever Adrian was. "To survival," she whispered, "and to knowing when to stop fighting." She drank, felt the burn, let it ground her in the present moment. The past was behind her now, the violence, the strategy, the constant calculation of risk and reward. Ahead was something simpler, but no less important. A chance to be someone new, to build a life that wasn't defined by the wars other people started. Marissa had asked if it would be lonely. Probably. But loneliness was better than being surrounded by people who saw her only as Adrian Volkov's widow, the woman who'd helped destroy the syndicate, the strategist who'd seen the danger 8 seconds before the bullets flew. Those things were all true, but they weren't all she was. She'd also been someone who'd chosen to work instead of marrying rich, who'd noticed details because she cared about getting things right, who'd fallen in love with a complicated man and had tried to save him even when saving him meant letting him go. That person was still in there, underneath all the survival skills and strategic thinking. That person deserved a chance to exist without constant threat, without having to notice the wrong staff or the wrong table or the setup she'd see coming. The flight would take 12 hours. Alara reclined her seat, pulled out the book she'd brought, something light and meaningless, deliberately chosen because she was done with heavy for a while. She read 3 pages before her eyes drifted closed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She dreamed of the restaurant, of that first night when everything had gone wrong. But in the dream, she noticed the danger, and instead of writing a note, she simply stood up and walked out. Adrian followed her without question, Marissa behind him, and they all just left. The gunman burst in to find empty chairs, and the whole trap collapsed because its targets had refused to participate. When Alara woke, the dream faded, but the feeling remained. The understanding that sometimes the smartest move wasn't to outthink your enemies, but to refuse to play their game at all. Adrian had spent his whole life playing, matching move for move, always trying to be 3 steps ahead. And it had killed him. She wouldn't make the same mistake. The plane began its descent as the sun rose over a new city, a new country, a new life. Alara gathered her things, checked her reflection in the small mirror, saw a woman who looked tired but not broken, scarred but not destroyed, changed but not lost. When the wheels touched down, she took a breath and made herself a promise. She would honor Adrian's memory not by continuing his war or seeking revenge on everyone who'd hurt him, but by living the kind of life he'd wanted at the end. Peaceful, simple, free from the constant calculation of threat and response. She would notice things because she wanted to, not because her survival depended on it. She would build relationships based on trust instead of strategy. She would allow herself to be ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of person who could walk past a restaurant with the wrong staff and just think it was an off night instead of a death trap. That was the gift Adrian had given her with his last words about forgiveness. He'd shown her that holding on to anger, onto the need for revenge, onto the endless cycle of violence, that was the real prison. Letting go was freedom. Walking through the airport in a country where she'd never been, where nobody knew her name or her story, Alara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone trying to survive, but the quiet hope of someone who believed better days were possible. She stepped out into the tropical heat, hailed a taxi to the small apartment she'd rented sight unseen, and began the process of becoming whoever she would be next. It wouldn't be easy. Grief didn't work on a schedule, and there would be days when she'd wake up reaching for Adrian only to remember he was gone. There would be moments when she'd see something that would make her want to call Marcus, to check in, to make sure Marissa was okay. But those moments would get easier. The sharp edges of loss would soften into something she could carry without it cutting her every time she breathed. And eventually she'd build something new from the pieces of who she'd been and who she'd become. The apartment was small but clean, with a balcony that overlooked the ocean. Different ocean, different view, but the sound of the waves was the same. Alara stood there her first evening, watching the sunset paint the water orange and gold, and felt Adrian's presence not as a ghost, but as a memory that could coexist with moving forward. "I did it," she said to the wind, to the water, to the man who wasn't there to hear it. "I finished it. I protected your mother. I made Dimitri pay. And I chose mercy when revenge would have been easier. I hope that's what you would have wanted. I hope you'd be proud." The ocean didn't answer, but Alara didn't need it to. She knew in her bones that she'd made the right choices, even when they'd been hard, even when they'd cost her the satisfaction of watching Adrian's enemies burn. Because in the end, that's what separated her from people like Dimitri and Victor. They saw the world as something to conquer, something to control through force and fear. She saw it as something to survive, to navigate, to ultimately leave better than she'd found it. Adrian had taught her how to fight, but he'd also taught her, in those final moments, when to stop fighting. And that lesson was worth more than all the strategy and calculation in the world. Alara went inside, unpacked her bags, started the simple work of building a life. She enrolled in language classes, found a job that paid enough to live on, made friends who knew nothing about the Novak Syndicate or Adrian Volkov or the woman who'd helped bring down a criminal empire. She became, slowly and painfully, ordinary. And it was the greatest triumph of her life. 6 months after Adrian's death, Alara received a letter forwarded through Marcus. No return address, but she recognized Marissa's handwriting. Inside was a single page. "Alara, I don't know if you'll read this or if you even want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that the trial concluded. Dmitry Orlov was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. 37 other syndicate members received sentences ranging from 10 to 40 years. The organization Adrian spent his life building and 3 months destroying is truly finished now. The FBI agent you worked with, Rivera, told me that without your evidence, none of this would have been possible. She said you could have burned everything down but chose to build a case instead. That takes strength I'm not sure I possess. Adrian was right to love you. I hope wherever you are, you've found peace. You deserve it more than any of us." Alara folded the letter, put it in a box with the few mementos she'd kept. Adrian's photo, a pressed flower from the Coast House, a coin from their first date that felt like it had happened in another lifetime. She didn't need these things to remember, but having them felt important. They were proof that what she'd lived through was real, that the love and the loss and the choices had all mattered. She wrote back to Marissa, a short note saying she was well, that she hoped Marissa had found peace too, that forgiveness was a process and they were both doing their best. She didn't include a return address. Some connections were meant to exist in memory, not in ongoing correspondence. Life continued. Alara learned the new language, made friends with her neighbors, started dating someone who knew nothing about her past and didn't press when she said she wasn't ready to talk about it. She taught herself to sleep without checking the locks 3 times, to walk past strangers without cataloging potential threats, To exist in the world without the constant vigilance that had kept her alive but had also kept her from really living. It was hard. Some days it felt impossible. But she did it anyway, because that's what survivors did. They survived, and then they learned to do more than just survive. A year after Adrian's death, Ilara sat on her balcony watching another sunset and realized she'd gone the entire day without thinking about the syndicate or Dimitri or the night at the restaurant. It was just a day. Work, lunch with a friend, grocery shopping, normal things that normal people did. And it felt like victory. Not the dramatic victory of watching enemies fall or empires crumble. The quiet victory of healing, of moving forward, of choosing life over the endless cycle of revenge and violence that had consumed so many people she'd known. Adrian would have understood. The man he'd been at the end, sitting on that deck talking about umbrella drinks and starting over, that man would have wanted this for her. Would have wanted her to be happy, to be safe, to be free from the weight of his world. So she gave herself permission to be all those things. To be happy when happiness came. To be safe in her ordinary life. To be free from the past that had tried to define her. She kept Adrian's memory not in mourning, but in gratitude. For the time they'd had, for the lessons he'd taught her, for the strength she'd discovered she possessed, when there was no other choice. He'd given her a life she never could have imagined, and when that life ended, he'd given her permission to build a new one. That was love. Not the dramatic, explosive kind that made for good stories, but the quiet, enduring kind that survived even death. The kind that said you matter, your happiness matters, and I want you to find it, even if I'm not there to share it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ilara raised her glass of wine, not whiskey anymore, she'd moved past that, and made one final toast. To second chances, she said to the ocean, to the sky, to the memory of the man who'd loved her, and to knowing that survival is just the beginning. The waves crashed below, endless and unconcerned with human drama, and Ilara sat in the gathering dark, at peace with her choices, ready for whatever came next. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that the bravest thing you could do wasn't to win every fight, but to know when to walk away from the battlefield entirely. To choose your own path instead of letting others choose it for you through their violence and their threats. Adrian had spent his life fighting. She would spend hers living. And that, in the end, was how she'd honor him. Not by continuing his war, but by embracing the peace he'd wanted but never quite reached. She would live for both of them, fully, completely, without apology. It wasn't the ending anyone would have predicted when she'd walked into that restaurant 4 months pregnant with danger, but it was the ending she'd chosen, the ending she'd earned, and that made all the difference.